Welcome, everyone, to our February 23rd Board of Education meeting. It is 5:44 p.m. and I'm just going to do a roll call to see who's present this evening. Carrie? Here. Eric?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Francine? Here. Daisy? Here. And myself, Sonia, present. Jason will not be joining us this evening. So we have a quorum, we're good to go. So I just need a motion now to adjourn to executive session. We have Dr. Bamla's quarterly review, as well as contract negotiations for a management confidential, as well as our district office administrative team. Carrie, thank you. In a second. Eric? Thank you. Okay, and all those in favor, we can actually raise your hands tonight. I can see everyone. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you so much. We are adjourned. Exactly. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We are returning from executive session. I just need a motion, please, to open up a public session. Carrie, thank you. And a second. Eric, thank you. And all those in favor, I'm not used to calling names, you can raise our hands now. And motion passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, we are back in session. And since we're in person, we don't have our student rep here physically present with us, so we'll just stand and do the pledge ourselves. Great, thank you. Normally we begin with administrative remarks and board president remarks, but we have a lot to go over in our presentations this evening, so we'll be addressing all our comments at that time. So we can actually go straight to our student representative. Do we have her on, Diana?
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. We have a couple exciting announcements today. First of all, junior Nora Palladino was awarded a Certificate of Excellence through the Prudential Spirit of Community Awards. The award celebrates Nora's commitment to community service, specifically for her work establishing and running the Little Free Pantry of Brewster, and it recognizes her as being in the top 10% of all New York State volunteers considered for the 2021 awards. So that is so great, and Nora is so great. So that is really exciting. If you see her, say congratulations. This week in Brewster Central School District is Kindness Week. So today, the fun little challenge was to give 5 different people compliments. Tomorrow is Wellness Wednesday, so you are being kind to yourself. You can share a photo or a video of you taking care of yourself by going for a walk, doing yoga, something like that. On Thursday, it is Thank You Thursday shout out. So you can record a video or take a photo thanking someone for something. And Friday is Celebrating Community. So wearing Brewster gear, creating positive signs, things like that. And then the last thing I have to share is that we will be having an SAT on March 13th. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And the sound is great tonight as well when we were doing, we were having technical issues before. And I just want to also thank everyone who's on tonight and bearing with us while we were just getting our sound all organized for the meeting. Okay, we can now move on to our presentations, recognition, discussion. And first up, we have our district highlights. Dr. Bamla.
Thank you, Ms. Masika, and good evening, members of the board, and good evening to all of our public that's on with us tonight. Tonight, our first district highlight that we're going to be sharing is we're going to be showcasing JFK Elementary School. So with us tonight will be Dr. Frank Zamberlin, principal, and Mr. John Conroy, assistant principal, who will be coming into us virtually to talk about the JFK professional learning community. Mr. Conroy?
Yep. Just like we ask the kids every day, you can unmute yourself now. Forgive me, everybody. So Dr. Banlow, thanks so much. All the board members, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. So we're always proud of what we do at JFK every day. So on behalf of myself and Dr. Zamperlin, we'll get right into PLCs. So PLC stands for Professional Learning Communities. We do that in-house. We're proud of that every day too, which means we utilize our staff. So we have 9 wonderful people that every single week, 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, every morning for just over 30 minutes, they're able to work with each grade level. And what that means is twofold. It's a win-win. We get to eat our cake, have our cake and eat it too, which means that every 30 minutes, each of those mornings, each grade level, kindergarten one day, first grade, second grade, and so on, get 30 minutes of quality time as a grade level. They cover everything from instruction, making sure they're aligned with each other on a day-to-day basis, and also all the little nuances, anything from PTA to activities. And so it's extremely valuable time. It's extremely valuable now, especially during the COVID time, for everybody to be on the same page one way or another. So what does that look like? For PLCs, we really like to utilize and incorporate throughout our days SEL, a few more letters, everybody. We are an elementary school, social emotional learning. And so here's the little spin each of these individuals takes from their own personal expertise, and they get to modify it just a little bit in how they now incorporate social emotional learning in the classroom. And this, of course, goes on throughout the entire year. So without any further ado, Mr. Whalen, if you're ready, would you be able to cue up the first video?
Hi, I'm Ashley Cunningham, school psychologist at JFK Elementary. So what I do during my PLC lessons in the classrooms is I focus on social emotional learning. So what I typically do during that time is I'll use pieces of the second step social emotional learning program. So this program uses various photographs and videos that depict children expressing various emotions, such as these. Also photographs showing various social conflict situations, situations that might arise in school. This gets children to start thinking and talking about feelings and ways to handle those feelings and different problems. This program also uses songs and other visuals such as this to help children learn how to handle those difficult feelings. So I'll typically use a lesson or multiple lessons from the second step program when I'm in a classroom. I will also use parts of the Everyday Speech social emotional learning platform. This is online and it uses video modeling and other digital videos and activities to help teach children about feelings and coping strategies. Both of the second step and Everyday Speech programs are in digital format, so they can easily be used with our remote populations. In addition, the second step program has also recently been updated in order to better represent a more diverse population. So that's been nice to use as well. Lastly, I will also use a storybook depending on the focus of my lesson. For example, these are a couple that I've been using currently, depending on the grade level. The Color Monster with kindergarten, and I've recently been using a little spot of anxiety with some of my second grade classes. And again, this helps further facilitate discussion on multiple feelings or specific feeling and how to handle those feelings. I have found that by incorporating books that do depict characters experiencing different emotions or going through different emotional difficulties, that these young kids are usually more likely to discuss and better understand their feelings when they can reflect on how they identify with the feelings with the characters in the books. So it helps them to realize that other children do have feelings similar to their own. So that's pretty much sums up what I'm doing during my time during PLC lessons. It's been a pleasure to work with the children on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, folks, just in case you didn't hear her name as she began, that's Miss Ashley Cunningham, and she is our school psychologist. All right, Mr. Whalen, for the sake of time, if you wouldn't mind, we'll just run through the next three and I'll wrap things up after that.
Hi, I'm Deputy Brian Supa. I work for the Cunningham Sheriff's Department, School Resource Officer here at JFK Elementary School. I have a great opportunity throughout the year to go into the students' classrooms and talk about safety lessons. Some of the lessons that we talk about are roles that the police officer has in the community and in the school. We talk about our safety drills. We demonstrate and explain each role and what is responsible for each of our students throughout each safety drill. We also talk about stranger danger and internet safety. The idea is we just want to create a mindset with our students that there is, no matter what the situation throws at them, there's always an opportunity for them to stay safe and go to safety. I had a great time going into the classrooms, teaching these students, and it's an honor to be able to do that. Thanks and have a good day.
And again, that's Deputy Brian Supa, our school SRO.
Hi, I'm Ruth Muller, the school social worker at JFK. I was asked to describe some of the things that I do in the classroom during PLC time. And what I would want to say is that I try to combine Brewster's strategic coherence plan with social emotional learning. So I will use a variety of books and songs to have discussions with the children. Some of my favorites are Listening to My Body, great book. The Dot, this talks about adaptability. The Girl Who Never Makes Mistakes. This is what I'm reading lately. It's about perseverance, how to catch a star, and around Valentine's Day, Words in Your Heart. The children love to hear different stories and are really good at identifying their feelings in the characters in the books and their own feelings too. We also focus on mood meters through the ruler program, and most of your children have made them this year. And at the end, I like to end my time with the children as they make badges. So it might be different one each time I go into the room. So this one says, I learned from my mistakes. The next time, I never give up. And maybe Kid Kindness Power. That's how a lot of times we start. Kid Kindness Power. And I'm a team player. The children amaze me because they'll remember what we made last time I was there, and it could be several months before. So it's been really fun to work with the children that way. Thank you.
All right, so in addition to those folks you just saw on the screen, we have our special area, or for those that are used to middle school or high school, our elective teachers. So our art teacher, music, librarian, and both phys ed teachers also participate in this process. So we have Mr. Don Brushy, our art teacher. He right now likes to incorporate design and really robotics. It's almost like what we used to do with Makerspace in the afternoons, where the kids are trying to learn how to be civic oriented and civic minded, work together, collaborate. And right now, as you can imagine at JFK with the little ones, we're very theme oriented. So we're right now focused on the winter, and they're talking about how to work with the snow, how to recycle. All right, so those are things Mr. Brushy's working with the students. Miss Kaler, Chris Kaler, teaches music. All right, Tubby the Tuba, everybody. It just makes you want to smile. You hear Tubby the Tuba and you just want to smile. All right, but it is extremely serious work that we do with the children. And so what Miss Kaler's doing right now is movement. The kids, we're gonna have thespians, everybody. This is gonna be good for our theater department. The kids are learning how to express themselves, and how do you express feelings, right? I mean, these are going from concrete to abstract thought process. Well, the kids do a wonderful job with it. And so not only are they exploring their feelings, but it's about being teased and then how to anti-bullying and be a good citizen. And you're going to hear a few more comments, and you'll see how we intertwine and embed common themes across all 9 different instructors' philosophies and approach. We have Elaine Karschmidt. She is our librarian. A few more books to show as quick visuals, everyone. This one's about snowflakes and just being physically active outside. Kindness is Cooler with Mrs. Ruler. Ms. Karschmidt loves her pop-up books. This is, again, stuff about the winter, how to get outside and play. And what's nice, too, is I also have a copy of The Color Monster. So you'll see the teachers share and incorporate similar literature, concepts, and themes with each other. All right, lastly, our wonderful phys ed department. Eric Bozzetto teaches Sweetheart for Heroes. They were kind enough to come here several years ago. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, extremely moving, and it's all about anti-bullying. Lastly, we have Jennifer Hirschman, covers also physical education, but mindfulness, healthy, physically healthy, mentally healthy. And so I will pause there. I often say to everybody, not only am I the assistant principal, but I'm also a school counselor. And the counselor in me could not be more proud of what we do for your children every day that they come to school, in addition to reading and writing and arithmetic. So thank you so much, everybody. I truly appreciate this time and opportunity. I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Banlow, and the board. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. We really appreciate the presentation, and please thank all of the staff at JFK. I don't want to miss anybody for their hard work, so really appreciate it.
Same to you. Thank you, everyone.
And just to also say thank you. It's so great to hear what goes on in the buildings, even though we're in this crazy virtual type learning space, but it's amazing to hear. And I loved everything that I heard, and I'm so glad that, you know, we keep moving ahead and doing great things with the kids. So thank you for the presentation. Okay, next up we have COVID update, Dr. Banlow and Dr. Gosh.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Masika. Please make sure that you can hear me well, because we have a lot of important information, and I want to make sure the board can hear me and also folks in the public can hear me. So just to get started, I just want to say none of us thought this was going to go on as long as it has, the pandemic. And we understand, not only as educators, but as parents ourselves, how difficult this is, not only for your children, but for you as parents. So I wanted just to state that first before we get started. And I also want to say that, you know, many times when we go through difficult situations, we use visualization to try to remember the good things. And my visualization in Brewster is the Friday night Bear Den football games, where I came out my first year here to a school that had incredible school spirit. The community came together. And I remember saying to the board, I can't believe how all the kids are in that Bear Den. They're all getting along. And it was just, it is something that I hold in my mind. And because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And as adults and parents and administrators, educators, all of us, staff in the Brewster schools, we have to have that vision and remember that. So, you know, as I get started, I also want to just kind of remember and remind all of us, including myself, that, you know, we started on this journey last March. We had incredible reentry committees with all stakeholders that worked all summer to make sure that we put in that reentry plan to the State Education Department, to the New York State Department of Health, and that it was accepted. We were able to open up our schools, probably one of the first in the county. But I really, really appreciated the hard work, and that work continued. We never stopped. We never stopped. Dr. Gosh and her committees have been continuing to work. The teachers, the staff, whether it's changing the bus routes, whether it's changing the schedules, these are all really, really heavy lifts. And I want to thank the board. I want to thank the community for their cooperation and support. But most importantly, I want to thank the staff as well, because it's so critical as we move forward through this difficult time that we don't let anything divide all of us, whether it's inside the school community or outside the school community. This is too beautiful of a community to let anything divide us. So with that said, I just want to share with the board that we have received, as you are well aware, hundreds and hundreds of emails. And they've all been very, very thoughtful emails. I've loved the theme of every single email is that we are anxious to work together with the board, with the school community, to do whatever we can to try to phase in and bring back more students. So we hear that, and we're going to be talking a bit more about that. Now, those emails come from a variety of different families. We have some emails that have the theme of bring back our students 5 days a week, please, every day. We have some emails that say we love the hybrid. Dr. Bamo, Board of Education, please do not change the hybrid situation that we have right now. We also have emails from parents that are asking, I want my child on 100% remote for the remainder of the school year. And I'm going to answer that question right now. Yes, you can do that, and we'll talk more about that for those families that want to stay 100% remote. And what I do love about the theme of all the emails is that everybody in those groups are all respectful to each other. And that's so, so important as we start to talk tonight about the things that we're already doing, and we'll highlight that a little bit during our presentation, but with some of the things that we're going to be planning to do as we move forward. So, you know, the first thing I want to kind of share with you, because we have so many questions, we're going to answer all the questions tonight. I want to thank Mrs. Cunningham and Ms. Masika for helping to flesh out some of those questions to make sure we cover everything. If we don't, please let us know. So an important memo came in last week, February 17th. I just want to read it to the board, not in detail, but I'm just going to pull out the main highlights of it. But there was a statement that came out from Assembly members Amy Paulin, Sandy Gallup, Tom Avenatti, Chris Burdick, Steve Otis, Gary Perchlow, and Ken Zabrowski. And you're also well aware that Mr. Seaman and I met 2 Fridays ago, the time was going too quick, with Senator Harcum. We were there with some board members throughout the region. I was also on a call with Senator Harcum with superintendents throughout the region. So we are constantly in communication. We're constantly talking, but most importantly, we let the senator know what we need. And that came out somewhat in what I'm going to be sharing with you. So the Assembly members had a conference call with the New York State Health Department on Monday, February 15th, to get clarification on the state school guidance and the process for revising the reopening plans, increasing teacher vaccinations, and securing more surveillance tests. So the guidance that came out, and we will go into this in even more detail during our presentation, is that the New York State Department of Health noted that the state's present guidance allows for flexibility. This is new, as demonstrated around the state. The guidance states, ensure that social distancing of at least 6 feet or a physical barrier. So we're going to show you tonight how that just came out and how that can change the picture. We continue to work with our medical director, the Putnam County Department of Health. Masks are a must. That is a non-negotiable, as per the medical experts. Also, the reopening plan, we had questions. Dr. Gosh and all of us in the district worked very hard to get the re-entry plans into the portal in order for us to open in September. So we all had questions. Do we have to redo all of those re-entry plans? So the answer came back that we do not, but we have to do the following. School districts need to work with parents and teachers and consult their county health department to revise the reopening plan. So anything new moving forward, we have to make sure that we are continuing to work with all stakeholders and constituents, both in and out of the district. Teacher vaccination, the Putnam County Department of Health is working really, really hard. We meet with them every Monday with every single superintendent in Putnam County, and they are working really hard to get more pods open here for vaccinations for the community. They realize that on this end of the county, you just in the state, the lower Hudson, that there's not a lot. So that is something they're working on. The surveillance testing that our school nurses, thank you so much. They have done a phenomenal job. Dr. Gosh, thank you so much. You've done a phenomenal job. We've been very successful with the infection rate is extremely low in the building. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. We're going to probably put a pause on that and watch the infection rate in the community in order to see whether or not we need to come back and do some more surveillance testing. That was the other point that came up to Senator Harkin and to the Putnam County Department of Health. I know in Somers, for example, because the superintendent did share this with us at one of our many meetings that we have, they're looking at getting 80 to 85%. If 80 to 85% of their teachers are vaccinated, then they're going to start to do some more phasing in of students. But we want to know from the State Department of Health, can you give us a metric or at least a community infection rate that will let us know in writing that it's okay to do X, Y, and Z. And I also just, and the board is well aware of this, we're always, once we check with the State Ed Department, once we check with the New York State Department of Health, we are constantly checking with, of course, the medical director and the Putnam County Department of Health, but we also check with the board attorneys. Because whatever we do, we need to make sure that we dot every I and we cross every T. And that's really important. So I wanted to mention that. So there have been a lot of things already happening. Just so you're aware, we are continuing to look at our transportation. As you know, we went from two-tiered busing to one-tiered busing. That happened really fast because of Mary Smith. She's amazing, and that transportation committee. But she is continuing as of today and last week to look at other options if we start to, because we're bringing back all of our students with IEPs. I promised Dr. Kennedy that I mentioned that she will be sending out information right after the board meeting. We want to talk to the board first and present to the board first, so all parents are aware that their children will be coming back. So you'll be getting information, parents, this week about your child if they have an IEP. Also, as even today, I had Mr. Fryer, our Director of Facilities, and Mr. Carlson, our CFO in the district, were out and looking at spaces again, and looking at, if it's got to be with physical barriers, what kind of physical barriers, and do they have to, what can we do outside the box? So we are going to be looking for a lot of creative, outside the box thinking as we pull together. We've already, by Wednesday, we will have the final list, right, Dr. Gosh, of all the people that have volunteered to join our committees, because the committees have been going, but we're looking forward to getting some more people to come in, roll up their sleeves, get involved, and help us to think, as the weather's getting warmer, what can we do? Because we are concerned about our children. We are concerned about our kids socially, emotionally, but we have to do this safely. As you know, we have to make sure that whatever decisions are made and come out of those committees, which we'll talk about shortly, that it ensures the best safety for our students and our staff. That is so important. So I know that the committees can do that work. I know that we're going to talk about a little bit of a timeline tonight. We do need, I'm really glad, I've spoken to many parents that have reached out, and I'm glad that they said, yeah, Dr. Banlow, I'm going to join the committee. So thank you for that. And I just want the board to be aware of that even though you might be getting a lot of emails, there's a lot of people that are definitely stepping up if they can. And if not, people are sending in suggestions for us and making sure the committees get those suggestions as they do that work. Okay, so one of the other things that some of the other districts, you have to remember, space in buildings, staffing in buildings, financial situations. I know we're in a better financial position this year, and Mr. Carlson has kept us extremely well apprised. There are districts that had, even before we learned that we were in a better position this year, just recently, that have the financial means to put MERV 13, I hope I said that right, Mr. Carlson, correct me if I'm wrong, MERV 13 filtration systems into their district. This is no small feat. This would have to happen over a long period of time. It would have to be budgeted for. It's not something that we can do right away. We have like MERV 8 and 9, right? Okay, so I'm learning all this stuff, this HVA stuff is just definitely not in my forte, but everything, we're looking at everything, and I can't, our board walked around when we first reopened. We have an incredible facilities department, and some of these folks, and Mr. And some of these folks just really, really created their own, they created things that we never even thought about. So we're looking forward to having that. And Mr. Fryer, please tell your department thank you again. And thank you for looking at some things again today. Okay, so Dr. Gosh and I are now going to go into a presentation, and I'm going to let her boot it up. And we're going to make sure we answer our questions, and we're going to talk about the timeline, and some phasing in ideas.
Thank you, Dr. Fennell. You wouldn't mind going ahead to the next slide, Mr. Whalen, we'll jump right in. Thank you. All right, so as Dr. Banlow mentioned, last week, the Putnam County Department of Health came out and shared that 6 feet of social distance was something that was a recommendation that was strongly recommended by the Putnam County Department of Health, the New York State Department of Health, and the CDC. However, it is just that, it's a recommendation and not necessarily a requirement. This was news to us, considering that everyone that we consulted with when we were building our reentry plan said 6 feet was a hard number. It's the bedrock of all of our planning. It's why we needed to do a hybrid approach, because we knew we could operate at 50% capacity. The 6 feet of social distance, for example, we'll take a classroom, let's say it's CD Star, that would typically fit 25, 26 students, and cuts that in half, where we have a maximum capacity in many classrooms at CD Star at 14. And that's one of the classrooms that can fit a larger amount of students. So this was what our planning was centralized on. So upon receiving this, we then reached out to the New York State Department of Health. What they clarified for us is that 6 feet is not 3 feet, it has to be 6 feet. The only exception is if there are barriers that are in use. We see from the definition that is on the slide, the other sort of caveats that they attach to that. I don't normally like to put a lot of text on slides, but we put that in here because it was directly from the guidance. So now what this does for us, it's honestly a game changer, right? It presents an option that we plan on vigorously pursuing in a very deliberate manner, while keeping the health and safety of our students and staff at the forefront. So since we received this information last week, Mr. Whalen, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Since we received this information last week, Mr. Fryer, of course, is a wealth of knowledge. He has been able, since that time, to be able to share some of his ideas and thoughts with us. We have looked differently at the large spaces that we have as well, because given some of the proximate quarantine changes, which I'll get into in a subsequent slide, it might give us some additional options there where we wouldn't have to quarantine an entire space of students. And it really allows us to look at our existing space differently. Dr. Banlow mentioned Ms. Mary Smith, who is looking now at what it could potentially be, what it could potentially look like for transportation runs if we were to combine cohorts A and B, again, keeping to 1 per seat, the way we currently have the run structured. And we called our administrators together last week to say, factor this into your thinking. We know that you're developing multiple plans as we move through this to figure out how we can gain additional in-person instruction time for students. Now factor barriers and this new information into your planning. So all that happened last week. So then focusing into this week, here are the steps that are happening. Mr. Whalen, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. All right, so for this week, February 22nd to 26th, as Dr. Banlow mentioned, the survey where we asked for committee membership and or ideas and questions will close tomorrow. Invitations will go out this week for committee meetings next week. The preparations for returning students with IEPs 5 days a week, that continues. In a lot of instances, we are not able to fit all students with IEPs into the same physical space, given that 6 feet of social distance. So now we have to take into account this new factor of barriers. Is that something we need to think about for March 8th? Or do we move forward with the initial plans that the principals had about having classroom split? So additional information will be coming out on that. We also will be sending a survey to parents. And here's why we didn't send the survey last week. We felt like we didn't know what questions we were really asking, right? We needed to get clarification and to see what sort of parameters were around what we were asking. So we're going to send a survey to the parents of all students, non-binding, just to get a temperature gauge and to say, Okay, if we are able, if, right, big if, because this is just about information gathering and bringing this information forward to the subcommittees. If we are able to create a situation where students can come in 5 days a week, but that means they are at a distance of less than 6 feet with barriers, are you okay with that? Is that something that you want to do? And this is information that, again, we can use to move forward with our planning. So that survey will go out this week, and we'll have that information available for the subcommittees next week. As you can see, we continue the work into the next phase, March 1st to the 12th. At the March 9th board meeting, we plan on coming back to you with plans about how to increase in-person instructional time for students in grades K through 5. And we're not talking about all remote students, right? If they still want to stay all remote, they will be doing that. We're talking about students who are currently in a hybrid model. Moving forward into the next phase, the 15th through the 26th, we plan on coming back to you again at the 23rd, which we had initially talked about at the last board meeting, but we will be coming forward to you with how we can increase in-person instructional time for the remaining grades. So that's sort of the time frame that we're looking at and how we're sort of chunking the work as we move forward.
And Dr. Bosch, I'm glad that you're going through the timeline, because and I had mentioned this to the board at the beginning, and it's so important as these committees work that we have representation from as many families as possible and as many staff members as possible, so we get a really good temperature gauge of where do all of our families feel that we need to be moving. So what is everybody comfortable with? So it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. The next slide contains information regarding our subcommittees and who will be chairing those committees. Dr. Van, I'm not sure if you wanted to say a few words about this.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention again, I know that maybe not everybody was listening in on the board meeting, and the board members, I've mentioned this before, how important each of these committees are. Very, very critical. And we can't forego, I know there was a question about, can we just have 2 committees? Can we have 3? We can't do that, because everything is interdependent upon the other. And we don't want to miss anything when it comes to the safety of our students and our staff. So every committee has been running. We're going to be adding some other folks to the committee. We're excited about that. Thank you. But they have to all reconvene and continue to convene and then come together. And of course, I don't know if I mentioned this before, that Dr. Bosch and members of the board, that Dr. Casaro, who is our medical director, and as a medical director throughout the region, he will also be looking at, because we have to have our medical director look at it, and also the Putnam County Department of Health also offered to jump in and assist also. And they're very concerned about the social emotional piece too. So they will be a part of this work.
Thank you. The next slide speaks to some of the quarantine adjustments that have taken place, and this comes from the Putnam County Department of Health. Mr. Whalen, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. Okay, so contacts of an infected individual are broken into 2 categories. The first is a close contact. So those are individuals that are within 6 feet for at least 10 minutes. Okay, those are close contacts. There's no change when it comes to that. I believe Westchester County also says a close contact is a close contact. The difference between Putnam and Westchester, and now where there's a little bit of flexibility for us, is when it comes into proximate contact. So before, if there was an infectious individual in a classroom, the way that the Department of Health asked us to look at it was everyone in that classroom would need to be quarantined, whether they were 6 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet away. Now we are able to look at each individual situation and say, okay, what was the duration of time that that the infectious person and other contacts were in the same space? What sort of airflow was happening? Was the window creaked a little bit, or were they wide open with fans going, right? What percentage room capacity were they at? Were masks worn at all time? What type of activities were happening in classrooms? So we're able now to take into a more nuanced approach to quarantining as this happens. We received a question from a community member who said, can we just ignore proximate contacts and say that we're okay with close contacts, but proximate we don't want to adhere to? And the answer is no. This is the Putnam County Department of Health quarantines individuals. We are sort of the conduit that shares that information. They're the authority. we will of course consult with them and we'll run any gray areas by them, especially as we get used to this new system. But that's sort of the difference between the close and the proximate contacts and how Putnam County is now looking at this. The next slide speaks to our testing. Dr. Banlow mentioned that we have another testing date coming up Monday, March 1st. And, you know, in addition to our nurses who have been absolutely phenomenal, I want to thank again Mrs. Chalmers and all the support staff that have helped to organize and to facilitate those testing cycles. What we are proposing and asking is that this March 1st be sort of the last testing cycle for a little bit. When we started testing, I believe I just looked last night, we were around 10% in terms of the Putnam County infectivity rate on January 9th. Now I think we're around 3. Our in-person infectivity rate is 0.29%. We've administered, I think, over 700 tests, right? So all the things that we sort of wanted more information on, all the things that we were worried about in terms of providing another layer of health and safety, we're good for now. We'll see how Monday goes, but after that, we think we can divert our resources back and revisit as we need the surveillance testing of students and staff. All right, so now on to some of the questions that the board and or the administration has received. Dr. Banlow, would you like to take this one?
Sure, yes. So this question is, what is the process to reopen schools full time? Is it the superintendent's call? Does it require a vote of the school board? So the answer is, it's not the superintendent's call. It does not require a vote of the school board, although the school board continues to be extremely supportive and extremely informed. But if they chose to do that, they certainly could. But we make those decisions in conjunction with the guidance we get from the state education department, the New York State Department of Health, the guidance we get from our school medical director, and the guidance we get from the Putnam County Department of Health. Those are what guides our decisions, in addition to checking in with the school board attorney to make sure that, as I said, we've dotted every I and crossed every T.
Thank you. Next question. We have said that we will send out a survey this week, and it will have certain parameters around it. So it won't just be, are you in favor of 5 days a week instruction? It would be, are you in favor of 5 days a week instruction if your son or daughter may be seated less than 6 feet with a barrier in between? So it'll be that sort of detail, so we can sort of sort out those nuances and use it to inform our decision making. The next question has to do with testing. So just a quick infomercial on testing and the benefits of it. When we conducted the surveillance testing, every time we did so, we reported to the school report card. Fine, that's public facing, wonderful. We also reported to a system called eClares, which is the actual New York State Department of Health. Dr. Kennedy was able to get us our own license, and we worked through a lot of those layers. What happens then is that our results actually get calculated into the community infectivity rates. So because our infectivity rates within the school building based on the population that we surveyed was less than the community, it actually brought down the community's infectivity rates. It also provided information as to what our in-person infection rate looked like, which was very helpful for us. But as we mentioned, I feel like after March 1st, as long as things go the way we think they'll go, that we put that on pause and revisit as needed. Okay, what's the impediment to schools opening full time? So the reason why we didn't open full time in September, and by the way, we've been working full time, right? The teachers have been here every day, but students have not been able to be in for 5-day in-person a week instruction because of space and staffing. We built everything on the 6 feet, thought that was a hard number. We had to cut down the amount of social density and the amount of students that were in a given space on any particular day. The other side of that coin is staffing, right? Even if we are able to use additional spaces, what staffing can be shifted around, what staffing needs to be hired in order to accommodate that. So yeah, I would say initially in September, it had to do with space. Now that, there are barriers are an option. As I said, we're pursuing that in a way where we're keeping health and safety at the forefront. Okay. So again, I'm sorry if some of this is repetitive. I just want to make sure that we're hitting on all the points. This question is asking what is mandatory, what is recommended. We said 6 foot was recommended. It is the gold standard. However, this New York State Department of Health guidance that we received last week is underlined up here and says that the only exception to 6 feet are the appropriate physical barriers. Okay, we talked about families who are in all remote being able to stay in all remote. It's also important to note that if you're in hybrid and you're not comfortable with 5 days, or if you're not comfortable with any of the shifts that are being made, you can always go to all remote. And we said that would become, you can request it at any point throughout the semester. It becomes active middle of March and beginning of May. Okay, so this is a discussion that we actually had today. It's 6 feet and barriers based on what we know, and masks we're saying are non-negotiable. However, we reached out to the New York State Department of Health to see if it's 6 feet and a barrier, 6 feet or a barrier, and we're getting in writing a response to that. The important thing that has made our reopening so successful, that we believe leads to a low transmission rate in schools, is multiple layers of mitigation, right? So we make sure there's a health screener before students come in. Our cleaning and disinfecting protocols are top notch. We have the social distancing. Students are wearing masks, right? So all these things are all contributing to this low transmission rate in schools. We want to make sure that we keep a high level of mitigation as much as possible.
And I just want to follow up on something you said, Dr. Gosh, as far as getting something in writing. I want the board to know that our attorneys have reached out to the New York State Department of Health, the Putnam County Department of Health. Shanna Siegel has been amazing. She's reaching out to try to get something in writing. Our senator did. You've seen the assembly folks have. So if we could get something in writing that goes beyond that, or just that would be really great. And also to echo what you said, every district opened with 6 feet. That was the gold seal. So thank you.
Okay, according to New York State guidance, yes, barriers can be used in lieu of 6 feet, and we're exploring what this could look like. All right, so this question is a good one. It asks about how well we collaborate or work with other districts to learn from what they're doing, what's worked, what hasn't. I'll just say, I know Dr. Banlow has weekly calls with other Putnam County superintendents. I belong to a curriculum council, which is all of the assistant superintendents for instruction throughout the region. All of our administrators belong to multiple organizations that are like positions, right? So elementary principals are with their own groups, and they constantly are talking. This is all we're talking about. So this idea exchange is most definitely flowing, and we've been able to share a lot of what has worked for us as well. But we continue to make sure that we have these partnerships with other districts where we're learning what they're doing. Okay, this question has to do with high risk sports being approved and not full-time instruction. So I'll just go back to the reason why we weren't able to bring students in for 5 days a week. It had to do with space and the social distancing guidelines. So this is what was put out to us as something that we needed to put into our reentry plans. When it comes to athletics, the New York State Department, the authorities told us that we could have high risk sports, and we put the conditions in place in order to make sure that we met all of the requirements. We're following the regulations in order to do that.
Yes, and as this virus evolves and the pandemic evolves, I think we learn more about it. Scientists learn more about it. Medical professionals learn more about it, and we also worry about the social emotional part of our children. So I think people are trying to find safe and creative ways to make sure that we're meeting the needs. And Section 1 did work on that. And I know our athletic director is here to answer some athletic questions tonight too. Okay,
so this question gives us the opportunity to make a statement that we think that we've said before, but we want to make sure that we say loud and clear. Are we considering the impact on students' physical and emotional needs in the hybrid option? So we, as educators, want all students here full-time who want to be here full-time. That is our goal. This is what we want. We want to make sure we do it in a deliberate and safe way, the way that we've done all of this reentry. It's not like we prefer to have students in hybrid. It's what the situation is, and we're working to increase in-person instructional time. So we'll say that. In addition, we know that school is so much more than just academics. And when students are not here, they miss that structure, they miss social emotional development, they miss interaction with peers. School is supposed to be, learning is supposed to be a social construct. And when that social construct doesn't exist, there is some, it's lacking, right? So we have staff that are committed to this. We have subcommittees that are devoted to this. This is something that we think will be reflected when we talk about next year's budget. So this is most definitely, we know that this happens, that social emotional development and academic development happen hand in hand. We want to make sure that we're doing all we can to support the growth of our students. And this is absolutely a top priority for us.
And Dr. Gosh, I promised all of our collective bargaining groups that we've met with the heads of each of those groups today, that I would say that, you know, nobody wants the kids back more than all of us. All of us, you know, we worry about the children. We're here to educate. That's our job. That's what we do. So I promised them that I would say that, and they're looking forward to getting into these committees as well and rolling up their sleeves and working together as a full community, both in and out of the district.
Okay, are we considering full person instruction for all students in K2? We're making sure that we're doing all that we can for this to happen K-12. If we are able to increase the amount of in-person instructional time, it's possible there might be a phase-in approach where it might be a K2 or K5, but we will be able to come back in a couple of weeks with more concrete plans about what that will look like. And the answer is yes. Okay, so this one is another good question having to do with students meeting grade level standards. How are we sure that not just content is covered, but that students are gaining proficiency in the learning standards across the content areas? So I'll just start by saying this is a regional issue. It's a national issue. The New York State Department of Education recognizes that all students that it might not be the best idea to test in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8. They submitted a waiver to the US Department of Education to that effect. And it's a result of them knowing that we're in a pandemic and that might not be, testing of students might not be the top priority. The advanced placement exams even made adjustments to the amount of times that they administer assessments and what those assessments look like. So this is a regional and a national issue. Not to say that we shouldn't do anything about it, that's the exact opposite, but we're all in the same boat. What we are planning on doing is we're doubling down on our curriculum alignment and articulation. We need to make sure that we have a solid mapping approach. We need to make sure that there is articulation between grade levels. We've asked teachers to identify priority standards in each grade level for their curriculum area. These are priority standards that are weighted, if you will, and they will be able to help students really engage more deeply with the learning standards and be able to think through some of the more complex concepts in a given grade level. So those are conversations we're actively engaged in, and it's actually part of what the teachers will be doing at in the PM in the afternoon of our March 1st Professional Learning Day. This is why this release time is so valuable for teachers, so that they can have these conversations across content areas. We're also looking at our assessment data. What's actionable? How can we use what we know about student learning in order to inform our instructional decisions? And I'll reiterate this. I know it's not easy to hear, but this is a multi-year process. And any district that tells you that all students will be where they need to be in June, as if this pandemic hasn't happened for a year, I don't think they're being 100% honest. This is a multi-year process that we need to make sure we're operating on all cylinders in order to support student learning over time and to give students what they need in order to be successful. And Mr. Carlson was sure to make sure we added this last bullet. We think that the budget and that the resources that you'll see and some of the ways that we're thinking about next year's budget will support this.
Yeah, we were very thrilled about Mr. Carlson throwing that in. And also I want to thank Dr. Gosh, who sent her suggestion about some grant money that Senator Horton's office has. So we're hoping maybe we get some help there too.
And this is another great question. Will we make sure we're following all the guidelines? Absolutely. Multiple layers of mitigation is what we're after. We're not going to do anything that's reckless. We're going to make sure we're deliberate and thoughtful. And if we can bring students back, which is our goal, to increase the amount of in-person instruction time within the guidelines in a safe way, we will absolutely do it. Yeah, this is a question for all remote teachers. So I assume that this is referring to K-5 because we do have some all remote sections. And in grades 6 through 12, I don't believe there are any fully remote teachers. So actually, this is a timely question. When we're talking about bringing back students with IEPs, when we were still tied to the 6 feet, we had said that we needed to recapture some of the all remote spaces in order to have students with IEPs in those spaces. The barriers, again, kind of throws us into question in terms of, are we going to have all the students in one space at less than 6 feet with barriers, or are we going to continue with that plan? So that is one answer to that. And we're also looking at, I mean, again, the principals today, we were talking, they literally had 3 or 4 different plans that they're working on when they're looking at classroom space, larger spaces, and how they can best utilize and maximize those spaces in order to increase the amount of in-person instructional time for students. Okay, next one. All right. Can COVID-related information be provided in Spanish and can board meetings be translated into Spanish? So I'll take the first part of that, or go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, can I?
Please, yes.
Okay, so then I'll let you jump in there. Right, so, you know, I have learned over the course of the time I've been here that a lot of the written information that we send out in Spanish is in some instances is a little bit too difficult for some of our non-English speaking families to understand because the vocabulary is a little bit high. So I have, we are working really, really hard. Like, for example, for tonight, this presentation is being videotaped. We will share it again in English on the website, but we will also going to have a voiceover in Spanish so that it's very, very clear. We also have the Parent University, where whatever information we're sharing at the board meeting, we make sure that that is shared at Parent University. It's every Wednesday night in Spanish, but that is paid for through a grant in the district. So Dr. Rosh, did you want to jump in?
Just that the weekly updates are also sent out in each parent's identified native language. I believe there are over 20 native languages. Listen when you talk, Mr. Chua, 20 native languages that our families have asked for.
Okay. So at this point, we wanted to ask Mrs. Cunningham if there's any other questions that we might have missed that we can make sure we cover.
Yeah, I will say you guys did a great job. I wanted to clarify one thing, and it may just be me. The 6 feet recommendation, which is apparently now a recommendation. I think what you're saying is that you can forego the 6 feet if you have some sort of barrier, which I'm envisioning some sort of plastic barrier per desk. But we can still require that masks be worn in school. They obviously need to be worn when kids are passing in the hallways because there's no barriers there. Because one thing that comes to my mind when I think of these barriers is how are we keeping them clean? If kids are not wearing a mask, sneezing, breathing, talking, whatever, you know, then that's a whole other layer of cleaning. So I just wanted to make sure that as a district, we're allowed to require masks being worn.
Yes, we are allowed to do that, and we are getting that guidance.
One question on the follow-up on the quarantining. It sounds like the Department of Health, the Putnam Department of Health may be more open to considering the close contact analysis. But until we know how they're going to, how they're really going to interpret that, are they really going to deviate from the proximate contact? Is it a concern that if we open 5 days and we have more kids in the building and the quarantining isn't changing, that we're going to be in a situation where we have more kids and more teachers out? Like, so do we need some sort of like trial period with the Department of Health? And maybe that's now, I don't know, while we're working through opening, you know, but to see how they're really going to interpret this and if they are going to, you know, go more with the close contact.
Good question. So I think we should say, we're not, and I'm not saying you're saying this, But I think it's important for the community to know, in interpreting these new proximate contact guidelines with the Department of Health, we're not trying to skirt anything. If it's an exposure, and whoever, student staff needs to be quarantined, right? So that's that. We've run through some scenarios with the Department of Health. So let's say a middle school classroom where the periods are 40 minutes. Sorry if I'm getting into too much detail, but the middle school classroom where the periods are 40 minutes. That's not as, let's say, severe as a situation where K-5 students who may be in with the same cohort of students all day, right? So that would be looked at differently and be one of the variables that would be taken into consideration. I'd say middle school classroom, if it was let's say the teacher that was positive and was in the front of the room, the students immediately near that teacher would be quarantined. And maybe if the windows are open and if there's good airflow, maybe the students in certain areas wouldn't have to be quarantined. So there's some flexibility there. There's another example is in the middle school with in the gym with the curtain across the center of the gym. That now can be seen as two separate spaces where before it was one. So there's some of those gray areas help. But to answer your question directly, absolutely. If we go less than 6 feet, more students will have more students. The social density will increase. More students will be in that space, and more students and staff could be quarantined as a result.
The quarantines are decided by the Department of Health, not the district.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. The only other question, which I think Sonia is going to respond to, that we received from the public, was an email asking what the position of each Board of Education member is as it relates to opening 5 days, and what our sense of urgency is with respect to that. So I think Sonia's going to take that one.
Thank you. So, sense of urgencies, I think we all have that. We all want whatever we can do, the fastest we can do it in the best way we can do it. So that's not a question. I think we've expressed that over many meetings. And generally, just to kind of help explain to the community, it's not just a simple answer, and for us to all speak. The board functions as one. No board trustee outweighs another. We function as one. And it is our responsibility when we are elected into this position to really do our best to check our personal opinions that really could be self-serving, because our job is to represent all parents and students in this district. And, if we have a very limited view that comes from just myself, that's not going to serve all the parents and students in Brewster. And when it comes to how we vote on any particular matter, this one, for example, we are presented as we are today. We are presented with the most current information from all the different health departments and any other source that we're getting information from. And it is our responsibility to make a decision based on the information we are presented with. And we factor in, of course, we get tons of emails. So we factor in all the information we get from our community, as well as the guidance, and we weigh all that in our discussion. So people are looking to hear where we stand on different things. During our board meetings is when that opportunity exists, whether it's during the presentations, and we have questions after, or during the action items, when we have an opportunity after each action for questions or comments from the board for us to deliberate on that item. You'll hear us personally coming out with our questions and our thoughts. And if anyone's looking specifically, the only time we're really going to get that drilled down is at any given election time. At any election, we run as an individual person, not representing the board. So at that time, when we're asked questions, we answer them as individuals. But in this setting, we have to work together collectively, and we do get to absolutely vote our conscience. And that is based on the information we're presented at any given time. So I think that kind of covers it. I don't think anyone else wants to add anything, but that's the gist of that.
Say one more thing, just on the prior questions that we got from community members. And I think this is what you said, that if and when the school is open 5 days a week, this year, virtual, all remote will still be an option, but hybrid will no longer be an option. Is that right? Hybrid would need to choose between coming in or going all remote?
So quite honestly, I'm not ready to answer that. I think part of the, if that's okay, I think part of the, what we need is that temperature gauge from the community to see what this would look like. And we need to talk it through with our administrators or teachers to see what number of students we're talking about, what grade levels those are happening, what instructional delivery models are already in place, and how we can best execute that if possible.
But
We're
going to ask questions.
Yeah, if anyone on the board has questions on the presentation. Did you have one?
No, I do.
Go ahead.
I don't want to race to the head of the class. So, a few things. Yes, teachers. So the survey is going out, coming up. Where, if you said tomorrow is the last day for people to join the reopening committee, where would they find it? Is that an email to someone? Where would they find it?
So a post went out in Parent Square. It was in the last weekly update that was sent out 2 Fridays ago. We can send another reminder to say, last chance to sign up or to submit questions or ideas. Please send it here. And if there are other ideas or questions after that date, you can always just email us. We can incorporate that into the committee work.
You said that there's a lot of talk of the different associations and groups about reopening. Are you seeing other districts that have moved forward for reopening, or sort of, can we kind of talk about I know you said that the 6-foot guidance just came out, but this, can you talk, so I don't want to talk about necessarily the other districts, but just your feel for sort of the progress that we have made and under this ever-changing climate.
Do you mind if I jump in? Okay, and Dr. Bosch, please jump in if I forget anything. So we have weekly meetings with the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents as well as the Putnam County Superintendents. And throughout, since the start of the pandemic, it's been every single week. We share ideas. Everybody started with the 6 feet. Everybody started that way in September. We were very proud of our community, our staff and community, because we opened. Over the last several months, there have been, and I won't say the exact districts, there's been two to three districts that are starting to move to the 3 feet. But many of us were like, we have not seen anything in writing. We need to see it in writing, and we were checking with, all the our attorneys, New York State Department of Health, keep hammering out. So now this just came out with the barriers. So that's kind of the Putnam County Superintendents are now starting to talk and buzz about it. And so are the Westchester, even more now, because many of them still stuck with the 6 feet, even though some, about 2 weeks ago, Mr. Bretzner, it was probably about 3 districts that were definitely moving towards the 3 feet. But now that this new information came out, I think there's going to be more with barriers.
So the term barrier does not include masks. Masks and barriers.
Right, but all the guidance that we're getting medically, it is masks. It's non-negotiable.
And obviously, great thanks to the facilities department and what they've been able to do to meet the guidelines. We needed barriers in the cafeterias, and we got them. And so, obviously, great thanks to that department for what they've done there. So, I guess my last question is a little more. I apologize. It's a little bit of a hypothetical, but it's a little bit more involved. So, let's say the survey results come back, and we have a strong movement towards people wanting their kids to be back in school 5 days. And we've looked at our spaces, and we think we can start to accomplish that. And we sort of can, either of you or both of you sort of work through sort of what you envision sort of the step-by-step process will be towards, and I know some of this was already touched on, but what the step-by-step process will be from a review of what we have, what we can do, with the thought that we're moving in that direction. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's-
No, it makes complete sense. And as like I had mentioned in the beginning, the committees have been continuing work, right? They have been working. And, you know, as we move back to the 1-2 busing, for example. So when we start to look at that, and let's say, you know, you have majority of people sitting at the table 5 days a week, we still have to look at every single committee. We still have to think of the safety of our students and staff. We still have to, I'm not an epidemiologist, Dr. Bash, as much as now she's the COVID coordinator, she never thought she'd do that. She's not a physician. So we have to get that medical advice from our medical director, who is outstanding, by the way, and is known to be outstanding throughout the region, our Putnam County Department of Health, who have done an excellent job, you know, trying to follow the guidance. So we still have to get that advice, and we still have to also talk to our attorneys to vet everything out. So it still has to run through the course of the committees.
So when we see in some of the guidance or some of the statements from politicians or from the health, that the decision to open is on the schools, is it more accurate to say that the decision to utilize, to spend the resources and to find the space to locate the staff is on the school? It's not just something where we sit around, we decide it's a good thing, we have interest in the parents, so we're going to do it. It's much more about the steps that have to, the decision to really take the steps that are necessary to fulfill the space. I think that's been a problem for some people. You know, you ask politicians and they say, well, that decision is really for the schools to make, and then they come back to us and they say, well, why don't you make the decision?
And I totally understand the confusion that parents are having, all of us are having, when you see other states that are close or, you know, that are doing different things than we're doing in New York State. I think New York State has done an excellent job, but it's not that simple. So we can't just make the decisions in isolation. Say, this is what we're going to do as a school district, and that's it. We don't care. We can't. We have to consult with medical experts, because that is not our forte. We have to consult with our legal, because we have to make sure that, you know, we're doing everything right for the students and the staff and the families and Brewster. So it's complex.
Dr. Benlow, could I also just add to that? When the governor came out initially and said the decision to open schools is a local decision, I interpreted that as, are you all remote or are you hybrid? Like, you still have to operate within these guidelines, but your decision, that local decision, has to do with the learning mode that you're providing instruction in, and whether or not you're physically opening those buildings. So that's sort of how that local, I mean, we just can't make up our own rules, right? So that was the other piece. And the reason why we weren't able to open in September at 100, we were open. The reason why we weren't able to welcome back 100% of our students for 5 days in person week, 5 days a week instruction in person, is because of that social distancing, that 6 feet, what we thought was a requirement at the time. If I could also just add, in addition to the committee work, there's a lot of work that's going on outside of the committee. The hope is that, I mean, starting with, you know, Mr. Fryer and his idea, Mr. Carlson, Mr. Fryer walking the building, seeing what's happening, working with the principals to do some mock-ups in the classrooms. The idea is that all this work is done, we bring it, filter it through the committees, get their ideas, get their feedback, and are able to come forward to you with a recommendation. So the committee process, as you said, Dr. Bannon, 1,000,000%, it's vital, right? Vital to all that we do. We just don't want the community to think, or the board to think, that we're not doing anything until those meetings are happening, right? Like, this is, we have to do a lot of work up front to be able to say, here are our ideas, let us know what you're thinking. And in terms of actionable steps, in addition to all the ones we outlined, you know, once we're able to say, okay, this is what we think it could look like, parents then have to recommit, right? They have to then tell us, we should give people another chance to say, I'm not comfortable, I'm going all remote, or yeah, I go forward with the 5-day week instruction. If we're able to get to that point, which we are hoping that we can. So there are all these logistical steps that need to happen in order to, to actually make this come forward, but I just wanted to make sure that we shared all of the work that's being done outside of the committee as well in order to be prepared and to bring these recommendations to you.
Thank you.
And then, trying to follow up, obviously, it's been a nonstop process. It's not like we just woke up tomorrow, hey, we're gonna go back to school. I understand and I appreciate the update. Get back to the committees. As a board, should we be on committees or should we be on it as parents if we want to be? Have we ever discussed board representation?
So that option exists, and we have a committee that's informing the board on decisions and directions that we take. We can have representative there, part of the work if we want to. And as a parent, we're always allowed to serve in any capacity as a parent while we're in this district. And just, it has to be very clear that that distinction is made. And when I try to do that, it almost never fails. Someone's like, well, you're also on the board. And it's really hard, I would say, if you have an interest, and if the board thought it was, helpful, then I would just say to serve as a board person. That's hard for people to separate. Oh, you're here, this is a parent, you're not going to discuss anything about the board. But, and I guess I would ask Dr. Banlow and Dr. Bosch, do you feel that it would be helpful? Because sometimes I know people also get concerned about being honest and sharing, depending on what the committee is about. We want to make sure we're getting information that's truly informative and that people aren't holding back. I don't know, so just give thoughts on if you think it's helpful.
I wouldn't want to hold the board member back if they wanted to definitely serve as a parent on the committee. And I can see that happening where sometimes people might not feel comfortable, as a board member, if they just want to listen to what you have to say. But we certainly could do that if you want to do that as a parent, absolutely. Dr. Bosch, do you have any thoughts?
Does the board have thoughts on this committee work and how we serve or not, or as a parent? Some have thoughts on it?
I mean, my thought is generally that when we're present on a committee or something like that, it could change the dynamic. It's hard to separate out. Like you said, somebody may turn to you and say, well, she's on the board and she just said this, but then now she's at a board meeting voting a different way. And that's the distinction we were making before, that we have our personal views as parents, which are not what guide us in these seats. So, I mean, when I got the survey, I looked at it and I thought to myself, I'm not going to join the committee because I'm on board. But I don't have strong objection if a board member wants to do it as a parent. I'm fine with that. I just want to.
Do you want to serve, Scott? Is that what you're interested in?
Well, I might as a parent, there's one or two committees that I might be on. Want to make sure that it's okay. And then if it determines that Dr. Bosch then determines it's hindrance or something, I'll be more than happy to do something else. The hindrance, but it's a couple of things I would like to do. It's possible.
So I think it's fair as a parent, right? And then just if anything comes up about the board, just it's really be up to you to kind of go online and say, I'm here as a parent and here to discuss it. Feedback, sorry.
Okay.
Liz, did you want anything?
Okay, so last, for the re-entry subcommittee, I was on too. So again, I had shared that I have a brother in high school, and then I do have a daughter incoming kindergarten for the school year 2021, 2022. So as a parent, I did want to consider going back into those subcommittees, but same thing, I want to make sure that by joining in one of those subcommittees, it won't render anything where the public won't be open to doing so. The committees that I was thinking were going to be the same committees I was in for the re-entry, which was the bilingual education and the
the equity, oh my goodness, is there anything? Yes, thank you, digital equity. Those were the two that I was considering of rejoining, if that was possible. And I also had a few other questions too. So for the food distribution, if we do go to a full, we have the children back and we also have the remote kids as well, will the distribution of the meals change in any way?
I don't believe they would need to, given that we have students operating both of those models. We can get a definite answer on that, but Mr. Carlson is shaking his head no, that it would not change. It could stay the same.
Okay.
There we go.
And also just to just kind of focus back, I know we are inviting parents, and I just wanted to, again, because I do have an incoming kindergartner, right, that we would encourage also pre-K parents to also join these subcommittees, correct? Is that something?
That would be great for community participation.
Correct, yes.
Yes, yes. We have to think about how we would do that since
It's a great idea.
how we can get that out there. Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up also on, I'd love to see that the county is so supportive. I mean, they've always been a great partner. But I would like to, I want to push them. I want to stay with them, continue to work with them, and, you know, definitely remind them we're on the radar. Access to more testing, vaccination of teachers. I know it's not a requirement to an opening plan, but from listening to the state and the local leaders and the county, they're all in favor of having some type of plan involved in getting that. This is something maybe combining with, you do speak to all the other superintendents. So if we could push somehow that we can, you know, really get on the vaccination wagon, offer up a location, offer up transportation, and we have access to many things, and the other districts do as well, but to make it as easy as possible. That would just be one more thing in the box to aid us open up sooner. And you know, they also have great mental health resources, which we definitely need. They have meetings every week. We contact the local legislators. I've seen them all on TV. They're great to work with. We've worked with them before, and they want to work with us. So let's push them. Let's contact them. Next month is the state of the county meeting, where the county commissioner Odell will be up there giving an update on the state. I'm sure they might love to be able to say that, you know, they're a county above all others, and they've done all these things for their educational systems and their community. So I mean, if we really get on the radar, we really push with them, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to participate.
So, Mr. Seaman, thank you for suggesting that. It reminded me that every week we meet with them and we continue to push those things, just so you're aware. And also, Mr. Carlson had reminded me in the fall, you know, Brewster was a pod in the past for, you know, different types of, whether it was a flu shot, and we have that capability. So we did offer that up. So we often get on with County Executive Odell on those meetings on Monday. So we will definitely continue to push. Thank you.
I just have one quick question. In regards to vaccinations, have you heard anything from the State Department of Health yet? That they're going to recognize the changes from the CDC on quarantining requirements in regards to being vaccinated?
Yes.
I think that would help with our.
Yes, I believe. I'm 99% sure for both travel.
Dr. Harrington might know, yeah, but I hate to put him on the spot because we just got information in today.
So, Ms. Santos, you're talking about quarantine for exposure?
Right, so quarantine for exposure right, so the CDC stated if you've been vaccinated 2 weeks past your second vaccination for the next 3 months, you would not have to quarantine unless you showed symptoms.
Yes, that came down.
With close contact, not even vaccinated, close contact exposure. So I would think, so I wasn't sure if New York State Department of Health has had that people down from the CDC yet.
Yes. Okay.
Can you repeat that, Dr. Bosch, so everybody can hear it?
Yes, Dr. Harrington said that we have not received clarification from our attorneys yet on that, but we're hoping that that would come through based on the actions of the CDC and the New York State Department of Health.
And that actually was a question that we received an email later this afternoon, and I overlooked it. So thank you, because we did get an email about that. So maybe by next meeting, we will have received more guidance and can answer it.
You can also put that in the COVID update if we get that over time. I do know if an individual has tested positive, has a lab confirmed positive result within the last 90 days and they're exposed, they do not need to quarantine. So we'll get the exact vaccination language when it comes to exposure and travel. Right?
Just checking, anyone else? Any final questions? No? Okay. So I'll just address something now. I'll say it again later, but thank you to everyone in the community who emailed us. And it was quite an extensive list of questions. So, I apologize if we did miss anything. Please email us as a follow-up and we'll get back to you. And yes, I'll comment about comments again a little later, but just I want to thank everyone for taking the time. There were very lengthy, thoughtful emails that we received. Just took a little time to get through them. So I do hope that we got the question, covered all the questions. And we will continue to get updates out and every board meeting. Okay, so next up we have our equity update.
Yes, thank you. This will be a bit briefer. We are continuing our root cause team work as well as our data analysis with NYU. We also have continued since our last board meeting another administrative session on culturally responsive and sustaining educational practices. So that work continues. We also on March 1st, next Monday, we have our planned professional learning day, and this was a question that was brought up in one of the emails that was sent forward. We, for as long as I can remember in this role, and when I was principal of the middle school, we had a fall, we had a spring professional learning day. So this was something that was calendared and was approved last March by the board, this professional learning day. So in the morning, what we're going to do is our staff at large is going to become acquainted with the CRSE, or culturally responsive framework. So we're excited that we'll have some facilitators that will be leading their colleagues in some of this work, and just asking staff members to look at it from various perspectives, to think about the 4 pillars that are within the framework and what that means within their practice. So we're excited to bring this work to the staff at large. Also next week, part of the root cause analysis is a survey that will go out. It goes out to every staff member. It also will eventually we'll have community and parent surveys down the road. But this will give us feedback and additional data that the NYU team will take and will process and will use towards informing our long-term strategic plan. So just next week, those are two big milestones that are coming up in our equity work.
Thank you, Dr. Bosch. That's all.
Just a quick question. In these times where time is so limited, and I think one of the questions that came in on this actually, why do we do these days? Why are they important? I know you covered it, but just kind of again, so that the community understands how important these days are.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I guess we should just start big picture. We have a K-12 cross-role professional learning team that in the spring plans the next year's professional learning plan and professional learning days. As we move through the year, we talk about what activities we want to have on those days, how we can continue and sort of draw threads or strands throughout activities for the year. Some of this professional learning is mandated, as is actually there's a whole bunch of professional learning mandates. We'll go into detail on those, but the idea is that this is our staff are professionals, right? It's our job to make sure that they have the tools to best serve the needs of our students. And so by having these professional learning days, not only do they have chunks of time uninterrupted where they can sit down, collaborate with one another, look at what those curricular standards are, where we are in relation to those standards, how we progress throughout time, what student data we have available to us. We're also able to look at things like the culturally responsive sustaining educational framework, which is the centerpiece of our equity work in order to start those conversations. You know, I don't know if I'm being as articulate as I could be in saying, in stressing the importance of this. If I had my way, I would love to put even more professional learning days in, because there's never enough time for staff to be able to sit down and do the important work that we need them to do in terms of talking to one another. And sometimes the best professional learning is being able to sit down and have a conversation with a colleague who teaches the same thing that you do. So it's the idea of fostering the professional learning community, treating our staff as the professionals that they are, and being able to make sure that they have the tools that they need in order to best serve our students.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can, unless someone else has any more questions on this topic, no? Any other emails on equity? Nothing, okay. So now we move on to, just for those who are still with us online, we addressed the emails that came in as they relate to some of the presentations and later on as they relate to the action items. And if it didn't relate to anything on the agenda, we'll address it at the end. Okay, so next up, distribution 2025.
So no new updates for this meeting, but I'll keep the board informed.
Okay, thank you. And we can now move on to facilities planning task force, Mr. Carlos and Mr. Fred.
Hi, good evening. Chris, if you could pull up the slides. So this evening, we just wanted to speak to the board and pitch a recommendation for the establishment of a facilities task force. So at the January 12th board meeting, we had our architects, Fuller and D'Angelo, present our building condition survey, which is a massive undertaking. It's a thorough inspection of all of our facilities and grounds. And it's really a very technical process, and it's a lot. It's just a lot involved. It's best that we establish a committee to really break it into pieces and analyze it, and really decide what's best for our district moving forward. Chris, if you go to the next slide. So every successful project begins with thorough planning, and that's where we are today. That we've had this building condition survey performed, and now we need to go to the next step. Next slide. So really, here are a few things that we outlined. Again, building condition survey was completed. This evening, we're asking the board to consider establishing a task force, which would include broad representation from stakeholders, both internally and externally. Of course, we want to make sure that our community is supportive of any work that would be performed at our district, because these facilities are owned by our public and our students and staff. We would then present those recommendations to the board. Throughout the process, of course, we would solicit expert opinions and prioritize those improvements. Naturally, we're going to dream big and then have to corral ourselves into reality. After that point, we would then present to the Board of Education, probably around the fall, next fall, November 2021. If the board was willing to move forward, we would then ask the board to authorize a referendum vote for a construction bond. And that construction bond would then be voted on in May of 2022. So it sounds like a far way off. It's 17 months from now, but there's a lot of thought and consideration that needs to go into getting to that point. First next slide. Again, the building condition survey was completed. It's available on our website. It is a massive, massive document. If anyone is bored enough to review it, it's all there. Glenn reads it every night for bed. Next slide. So again, we want to make sure that we have a committee established that has a broad spectrum of representation of community members, staff members, And then, of course, soliciting experts in the construction field, as well as, of course, architects and engineers. Next slide. Some things for consideration. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but renovations with our existing facilities and structures, are they sufficient to meet our current needs and our anticipated needs? Site work, how can we improve our grounds and fields? Building additions, we'll look at enrollment projections and other considerations. Future program needs. Wouldn't it be great to have this type of learning environment or that or what have you? Repairs and maintenance, is there anything that we can defer to carry the useful life of an item for several more years before having to replace it? Safety and security, always a consideration, and then touch-up materials, aesthetic work. Next slide. So really, when it comes down to it, again, we're gonna dream big, as we often do whenever we think about what if and what could we do and we look around. There are compliance and safety standards, and those are the required must-haves. So, and it's a requirement that any safety item that's stipulated in the building condition survey, those must be implemented before any other work is to be performed. So, for example, if a building was non-compliant with ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, which none of our buildings are, but just as an example, we would be required to first perform construction to get that building in compliance with ADA before doing any other type of work. So those items that are compliance and safety standards, those are required must-have before we contemplate anything else. Then we get into academic planning. These are, where we really are going to dream big. We want to make sure that we incorporate everything that we're going to be discussing with our Vision 2025 conversation. And then we're going to really have to prioritize, and make that recommendation to the board of what's feasible. And speaking of feasible, financial planning. So each fall we talk about our long-range financial plan. I'm going to probably bore to death of it, but it's important. And through that work, and work with our fiscal advisors and other group of experts, we'll be able to set parameters of what the community can tolerate and afford without impacting the tax cap and the tax levy, making sure that we can afford it. And most importantly, we would be providing, obviously, improvements to our facilities. The finance committee would be an integral part in that. They have a meeting this June, and that'll be the topic that's discussed with the finance committee this June. Next slide. So just a quick timeline of what could transpire. So this spring, we established a committee. They review the building condition survey, identify program improvements. Over the summer, it will give the architects and engineers time to design and cost estimate. It's a very time-consuming process, takes a lot of time. So the summer is a good opportunity for them to really take all the feedback that they learned in the spring and get to work. We then reconvene in the fall and prioritize cost estimations and needs, present to the Board of Education no later than, say, December of 2021 for the board's consideration. Next slide. So the winter, the board, of course, would review the recommendations of the Facilities Planning Task Force. If the board chose to go forward with a community referendum, that would have to be approved by March. And then May 17, 2022 would be a potential bond referendum. Next slide. So next steps would be to solicit task force members, and we would ask that those responses be received by March 12th in order for us to review those requests. We would need a proposal for facilitators. Architects are obviously integral to this process because any of our dreams they need to put onto paper and to help us materialize those thoughts. We would then establish a task force at the March 23rd board meeting, and here are the dates that I've outlined. It's again, we want to make sure that we're meeting this spring as often as we can in order to really get a big jump on what is really going to take a lot of time over the summer for the architects to develop. We then again reconvene in the fall and hope that we're able to present to the board November or December of 2021. Next slide. So again, if anyone's interested, and assuming that the board is in favor of moving forward, we are going to begin to solicit members of the task force. Again, we're going to be reaching out to not only internal staff, but also our community groups and external stakeholders. So with that, I've also attached a charter, draft charter to the agenda for your review. It's it doesn't contain anything in addition to what I just presented up here, but it's for your review and consideration moving forward. And I just, Glenn suffered through 2 hours waiting to get to this moment, so I want to make sure that I give him an opportunity to share his experience serving on a task force during his time over at Palm. So I'll ask Glenn if you can come up and share some of your experience.
To make it short and sweet, it's very important that this goes out and we get a wide response of people to be on this task force. The only possible drawback is if this task force is allowed to become too large. When it does become too large, their progress is really not made at that point. It becomes counterproductive. That's why the people that want to be on this committee should be qualified. They should listen to input from other people so that it's more of one voice speaking for many. And that if they're going to also be on this task force, they have to greatly commit to be on the committee, not to say I want to be on it and then miss multiple meetings, because then you will not have the information necessary to give proper input and for decisions to be made. But it's very important that we do get a wide variety. You don't want to have this on a very narrow scale. You want it on a broader scale so that it can be a productive committee.
I have 3 questions. So just, and I didn't catch the times. Will these be evening meetings? Will they be done through Zoom?
Yeah, and Chris, if you could pull it back. Yeah, all meetings we would schedule for the evening, and want to make sure again that everybody's able to attend. 6:30 is the time of our board meeting start, so that's the time that we had established for this committee to meet as well. As you can see in the spring, there are obviously off weeks from our Board of Ed meetings, and then in the fall, of course, those dates are subject to change after the board sets its meeting calendar for the 21-22 school year.
And are you looking for, again, a board trustee to also serve on the committee as a board trustee, or?
So just, in the past, which predated my time here, but I understand in the past, there was at least a board member that served on the task force 2014, which then led to our most recently completed construction project. So it's been a practice of the past to have a board member serve on this committee.
Okay, and so we can discuss that and decide who that can be. And the other thing that occurred to me is I know for our booster vision 2025 plan, which has a 2026, we talked about, a broad vision for the district and it reaching all aspects of the district. So with this work beginning, how do you see this time into? Because I know that facilities really would be part of that as well, that work. So it really just seems you're getting a head start on that piece of it, but that it would inform that other group that would be meeting, just I guess the two would need to somehow connect.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical that this tie in directly with vision, because these two things go hand in hand, of course.
Okay. That's it for me. Does anyone else have questions?
Just a rough number, based upon what Mr. Pryor said, what size are you looking at? 6 people, 10 people, 20 people?
I'd say it's hard to say. I agree with Mr. Fryer in that, too big becomes too much. But also considering the different, just take each school building, for example. I mean, if we were to have a teacher representative from each of the 4 schools, there's 4 people alone. So what we had discussed, Glenn and I discussed, is potentially if we do have a larger group, and again, just comparing to the 2014 task force, which was a large group, it may be best for us to break that larger group into smaller subcommittees for certain, for certain considerations. So there may be a subcommittee for, maybe for each of the school buildings. We haven't yet got to that point. Our hope is that our facilitators will be able to assist us in that, given that this is their wheelhouse. They participate on these task force. This is their profession. So we're hoping that we'll get some guidance from our facilitators on how best to manage a group if a group becomes that large. So I apologize, that was a wishy-washy answer, but we'd like to keep it small. I mean, if I had to throw a number out, my preference would be fewer than 20. But 20 people is a lot. Those are a lot of competing interests at times.
Anyone else have a question? I'm fine with the task force being established, because really it's just going to inform us and the district and what the needs are and what the timeline would be to achieve the needs of the district. And you said, sometime November, December, be presented to the board and to make a decision. So really, it would be at that time we could. I think it's good to pursue it, be informed, and then at that time decide what and if, and we're going to proceed at that time. So, anyone else thoughts are okay with going forward?
I'm definitely in favor.
Yeah, everyone's kind of nodding. Everyone's
Great,
nodding.
thank you. And if of course, you have a process, we're going to, of course, inform and update the board as often as possible with any updates necessary. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And so next we have 2021-22 budget presentation, tax cap. Mr. Carlson, this is exciting.
Yes, this is exciting. But I've done a good job of keeping these short. So I hope, I appreciate that I've kept them short. I hope everyone else does as well. And it's helped starting earlier because we're able to chop it up a little bit better. So
Let me thank Mr. Perry. Thank you for also sharing. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
So here we are. This is now our fourth budget presentation. We're presenting our tax cap, which is a huge component of our annual school budget. Next slide, please. So just quick recap. I'm getting sick of seeing these slides myself. I'm sure you're getting sick of seeing them too. But just as a quick recap, tax cap, or the tax levy, makes up nearly 75% of our revenue budget. State aid makes up another 20%. So really the state is almost entirely controlling the development of our budget. You'll see that play out at the end here. Next slide. So tonight we're talking about the tax cap. A lot of this we covered in Budget 101. So I'm just giving a quick recap of what we have in Budget 101, which of course is on our website for eternity. Tax cap first came into play in 2011. So 12-13 was the first year that it impacted us. Now we've actually completed, or we're approaching the 10th year of the tax cap. And during that time, Brewster's tax levy increase has averaged just 1.98%. So we know it's not exactly 2% tax cap, but for us, it's surprisingly came in very close to about 2% of that 10-year average. Next slide. So some definitions. So we talk about tax cap and tax levy, and those two things, those are actually two different things. So tax cap is a benchmark. It's a calculation that was established by the state. It has a prescribed formula, and every school district has its own unique tax cap. No two districts are the same. Tax levy is the actual amount that's raised in taxes. So we use the tax cap as a benchmark for determining the tax levy, the actual amount that the voters approved when they approved the budget. So it can be higher or lower than tax cap. And if it is higher, of course, it requires a 60% voter approval to pass. If it's the same or lower, it requires just a simple majority, 50% plus one. Next slide. So again, we always say that it's not a 2% tax cap. 2% is just one of the factors in the formula. It's only been used 4 times over the 10 years of the tax cap. So here's just an example of that and how each school district is unique. So districts A and B could have proposed could have tax caps of 1% and 5% respectively. And if they both go out and levy a 1% and 5% respectively, neither one of them would be considered going cap. And in 1920, so two years ago, there were tax caps in the state of plus 131% Salamanca City School District. And then there was a low of a negative 25%. Yes, the tax cap can actually be a negative number. Indian River Central School District, I'm not quite sure where either of these school districts are. By my estimation, I would assume that they're both highly state aid dependent, and they rely very little on the tax levy, which is why there's such violent swings in those two districts. But just to show that some perspective that it could, it could be all over the place. Next slide. So there are four main components of the tax cap. There's the tax-based growth factor, allowable growth factor, pilots, and capital exclusions. Next slide. So starting with the tax-based growth factor. So this is a measure of brick and mortar construction within the tax base. So it can be a result of significant additions to existing properties or the construction of new properties within the tax base. And of course, we remember, of course, the Algonquin natural gas transmission plant that was constructed in the district, and that had a significant impact on our tax cap and raised it up over 4%. Brewster, of course, has no input over this factor. It's, of course, dependent on what's happening throughout the tax base. So this number is also tentative pending the taxable status date of March 1st. Actually, I'm sorry, Chris, if you could go back. So the tax-based growth factor, the impact that it had on this year's tax cap, it actually increased the tax cap by 0.32% or $250,000. Next slide. The allowable growth factor is really where the tax cap gets its name from, because it's based on the lesser of 2% or the change in the consumer price index. So it can never be greater than 2%, of course, and it can never be less than 0. And over the 10 years of the tax cap, the consumer price index has averaged an increase of, actually, I shouldn't say consumer price index, the allowable growth factor has averaged 1.55% during the tax cap era. And of course, we have no control over this factor either. The allowable growth factor increased the tax cap by 1.19% or 928,000. Next slide. Finally, we move on to pilot agreements or changes to pilot agreements. So pilot agreements are payments in lieu of tax. They're negotiated between the Putnam County Industrial Development Agency and commercial businesses. And they're agreements that entice businesses to operate within the tax base for a reduced payment in lieu of paying a property tax assessment, which escalates over a 10-year period, at which point the property becomes fully taxable and then goes on the tax rolls. So expiring pilots increase the tax cap because the property becomes fully taxable and goes on the tax roll again. The property absorbs the impact of the levy increase. So even though it has an increasing effect on the tax cap, other homeowners are not seeing it because that entire increase is being absorbed by that taxpayer, the pilot taxpayer. New pilots decrease the tax cap because the exempt portion is coming off the assessment roll, and instead of the district raising taxes, the commercial business is paying, making payments directly to the school district. And it impacts not just the school district, it's also town, it's also county, village, and other municipalities within that tax base. So again, the school district, Brewster, has no control over this factor either, which is also tentative pending the taxable status date, which is March 1st. And so pilot agreements are actually decreasing our tax cap for next year by about 0.1% or $89,000. And the reason for that is that we have a new pilot agreement that's coming into effect for next year, which is decreasing our tax cap. Next slide. Finally, we have capital exclusions. So capital exclusion is construction debt net of building aid. So at our last board meeting, we talked about our state aid increasing. And one of the main reasons, or one of the main drivers for that increase, was an increase in our building aid because of building aid ratios increasing. Again, there hasn't been any new construction since we completed that last major project, but our reimbursement ratio has increased. And because of that, our building aid has increased. So building aid actually has a decreasing effect on the tax cap. So it's, really the district is held harmless in the exchange. You know, our state aid is going up, but our tax cap is going down. So really it's a net zero impact. So next year, because of that increase in building aid, it's actually having a decreasing effect on our tax cap. So the tax cap's going down by 0.51% or $396,000. And, you know, we have a limited input or control over this factor. Of course, long-range financial planning and capital improvement projects impacts this the most, which we discuss again in our long-range financial planning, which we just discussed a moment ago in the establishment of a facilities planning task force. So the capital exclusion actually decreased our tax cap for next year. This number is also tentative, pending the taxable status date March 1st, and also the enacted state aid budget, which is April 1st. Next slide. So summarizing our tax cap. So our tax cap for next year is just 0.89%, or an increase of 693,000, which again, it shows the summary of each of those factors and how they impacted our tax cap for next year. Again, every school district is unique and has its own set of factors that play into the tax cap, and ours resulted in a tax cap of, again, 0.89%. Next slide. So each year there's a set of circumstances that impacts our tax cap. So looking at 21-22, again, you see the main change that's different from prior years is the capital exclusion, which went down, that green bar, which decreased the tax cap and limited it to just 0.89%. Last year, our tax cap was probably, pretty ordinary at 2.24%. The year prior to that, in 1920, again, that light blue bar shows the impact of the Algonquin natural gas transmission station, which increased our tax cap up to 4.06%. Again, the two prior years had pilots that impacted each of those years respectively, and had increases of about 2%, 2.2%. So just this slide just shows how each year can vary depending on the different factors. Next slide. Okay, so we talk about all of the state and federal aid and also the tax cap, and those are the two biggest drivers of our revenue budget. Because the state controls our revenue budget, really this is how we establish our budget. We need to establish our tax cap, and we see what we're going to get in state aid, and we have to work within those parameters. Those parameters for next year actually will result in a budget-to-budget decrease of about 600,000. Just a recap, bringing your attention to that local sources line. So you see the local sources line has a decrease of about 1.6 million. Remember, it's less of a decrease and more of an increase in the prior year. So the prior year's 2.8 million included $1.6 million of interfund transfer from the debt service fund. If you recall, we had a double up in expense for bond anticipation notes and bonds in the 2021 school year, both of which are going away in the 21-22 school year, which allows us to remove this revenue item. And also on the expense side of the budget, we remove, of course, the debt expense. If you recall from back in January, our debt is fell through the floor. So that's a good thing. So we have actually a budget-to-budget decrease of about 600,000 or 0.6%. Next slide. So our next meeting on the 9th. We'll be presenting enrollment, staffing. On the 9th, we'll have our first community budget forum on March 16th, 2 more board meetings, followed by our second community forum on the 13th. Budget adoption April 20th, budget hearing, required budget hearing a week before the budget vote on the 11th, and then of course, May 18th is the annual budget vote and trustee election. Slide. So as always, please visit our website for this and all prior presentations.
Thank you. Questions from anyone on the board?
Just one quick question. It comes up every year, pilots. Then it comes before the board, and the board has to vote on it. And it seems we're purely just in our official status voting yes. We don't have to say, we can't say no. It's just part of the paperwork.
Yeah, it's actually a courtesy that's extended to us by the IDA, which I really appreciate. And just in, my former district and in most districts, I don't believe their IDAs or their, taxing authorities, whether it be towns or cities or villages, are as considerate as the county IDA is in notifying us. So a standard pilot agreement is established in general municipal law and doesn't require the board's approval. It's established by law. Again, the IDA affords us the opportunity to notify us of it, and they request our feedback, of which, of course, we would likely not have it. So it's a courtesy that they extend to us, and I'm very appreciative of it. But in terms of the law, the district doesn't have any recourse if it opposed a pilot agreement.
Okay, so now we can move on to public remarks. So this is where we would address any emails that we received that relates specifically to our action items on this agenda. And then I know we do have a few more again that we will address later on for the end of the meeting.
Okay. We did receive, the first couple relate to action item number 10, which is the approval of the fall 2 and spring sports. We received, one email asking that the board approve the fall 2 and spring sports. We also received an email. Thanks, Victor. I'll just start over. Just the first few related to action item number 10 regarding the approval of fall 2 and spring sports. We received an email asking the board to approve both of those seasons. We also received an email from a parent asking the board to vote no on approving those 2 seasons and to change our vote where we approved high-risk winter sports. Citing the need to adhere to DOH guidance regarding social distancing and masks, and urging us to keep the best interests of the entire community in mind, and also making a recommendation that we follow what the Ivy League colleges have done. We also received, this isn't really it's related to the approval of sports, but we received about 5 emails from parents asking whether the athletic placement process will be used for the spring season. That's not actually something that we're voting on tonight, but I thought it related to that action item. One of the emails noted that an exception had been made for a wrestler in the 8th grade for the winter season. And another email noted that some of the girls' teams at the high school level are low, and that the advanced athletic placement program allows young kids to play up if they qualify. Those were the ones that related to action item 10. So you want to just address them?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. I also have our athletic director, Mr. Berardo, but before I ask Mr. Berardo to jump in with some clarifying answers to those really good questions, I just want to say Mr. Berardo has worked around the clock. Very last minute, we were thrown that we were allowed to have high-risk sports, but we moved, and we probably were a little criticized, but we moved slowly because we wanted to make sure that we did everything right. We spoke with our medical director and also with the Department of Health to make sure that we did everything right moving forward. So I want to thank Mr. Berardo for his tireless efforts. He's working around the clock like so many folks in the district. So Mr. Berardo, do you want to answer some of those questions? Were you able to hear them?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Dr. Banlow. Good evening, board trustees. First of all, obviously the high-risk sports for football and volleyball are on the resolution tonight. I would ask the board's consideration in those facts. Also, a couple of things that we've been planning on that may address some of the issues that we have been asked. I'll go right to the chase with the athletic placement process. That is a process where 7th and 8th grade athletes can have the opportunity by passing a physical fitness test and by school physician approval based upon experience and maturation that those athletes would have the opportunity to play at a higher level. And we have not participated in the athletic placement process with the lone exception of the aforementioned athlete because that athlete made the team last year. We have not offered that opportunity to any other athlete so far this year. We had a few other athletes who were on teams last year going through the approval process of athletic placement and did not want to participate. It was their family's decision in the winter. We also realized that, yes, we only had a 3-day season last year on the field, but those athletes who passed and qualified to participate in spring sports would have the opportunity this year. It is our hope when we get back outside with everybody in the spring. We've been progressing safely and at a level, we've been taking incremental steps, all in the interest of health and safety. We did not have athletic placement process in the fall. We started to build the teams based upon the guidance we had at that time. Then we went to high-risk sports, and we took into consideration that the athlete on the athletic placement process approval made the team. And we're taking small steps. We hope next season in the high-risk sports, we are consideration this evening, that we are able to have modified volleyball. That would be another step for our middle school students. And then our final step would be in the spring to have everybody back at it. Athletic placement process, modified sports, varsity and JV. Of course, the modified sports are pending Section 1 approval by the executive committee. I am on the modified committee. We have recommended that it would be a local school decision, but it is up to the Section 1 executive committee to make the final decision on that. But it is our intention, as we all know about the importance of mental health and having athletes participate and taking these, progressive steps, and that's a real coaching term, we're building on success each and every level, that we would have, the athletic program back in full swing safely in the spring season. Does that help you? Is that clarifying, I guess? Not help, but clarifying.
Thank you, Mr. Barone. I want to check with Mrs. Cunningham.
Yeah, so just a separate question. We're voting to approve modified sports today in the spring, but that's contingent on Section 1 approving them going forward.
That's correct, Mrs. Cunningham, because we have to put that in a resolution for the board's consideration. So if we approve it as a school district and a school board, we're still contingent upon the section approving the modified program. It is a high-risk sport. That's why we have to include it in the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barone. Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham.
There was one email with respect to action item number 12, which was the calendar adjustment. So the question was why parent-teacher conferences are being moved, and that noting that it's important for parents to speak with teachers at this time. I know Eric is our resident calendar expert. So.
Yeah, we're going to go back to that today.
Okay, Dr. Gosh, handle it.
Sure. After discussing the upcoming pre-approved parent-teacher conferences with the Brewster Teachers Association, we're making the recommendation that we push back, not eliminate, but push back the date on the spring parent-teacher conferences. This is in order to provide more continuity of instruction. We, at a minimum, the same cohort would have been hit on K-5 for the half-day dismissals. We don't want to do that. And we just want students back in school as much as possible. So parent-teacher conferences are important. They will happen. We're just asking that they not happen on March 11th and March 18th so that we can have continuity of instruction for our students and get them back for in-person instruction on a more consistent basis.
That was all of the emails about action items.
Okay. All right, we can move on to action items then. First up, we have approval of operational continuity pandemic addendum to 2020-21 district-wide and building level emergency response plans.
Yeah, so this is a required addendum, obviously in response to the pandemic. It requires school districts throughout the state to establish an addendum for a response to a pandemic. Really, the most important takeaway is to ensure that adequate PPE is available for any staff that's deemed essential during a pandemic, during a state declared emergency.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion for this item, please. Carrie, thank you. In a second. Eric, questions or comments from the board on this item?
I just have one quick question. It lists certain jobs that are considered essential. Now, is that they're essential only in the case of emergency, or is that something we have to add to our July reorg so that they're set up?
No, this is only in the event of a state declared emergency. And you know, we were intentionally broad in identifying employee titles as essential because it really depends. I mean, back when this started, we never considered our food service employees as essential until we realized how important it was that we make sure that we are delivering meals to our families. So again, this template was provided to us by the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, and we thank them for that. So each of the component districts in the Putnam Northern Westchester region is using the same template. And again, it was intentionally broad to make sure that we include all employee types in the event that it's necessary for those employees to report to work.
Anyone else? Right, seeing none, we can go to the vote. I'm not used to doing this in person. All those in favor? There's 6 of us tonight and none opposed. The motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Okay, action item number 2, disposal of district property, transportation vehicle.
Yes, this vehicle is over 17 years old and has over 225,000 miles on it and has significant engine damage and brake damage as well.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion from the board. Scott, thank you. In a second. Francine, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? All right. With none, we can go to the vote. All those in favor? 6. None opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Action item number 3, approval of emergency transportation services agreement and side letter of agreement with SEIU.
Yes, this is a short-term intervention for one of our special needs students in a parental transportation agreement.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion for this item, please. Daisy, thank you. And a second. Carrie, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, go to the vote. All those in favor? 6, none opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Approval of tax refund.
Yes, this was reviewed by our tax receiver as well as our treasurer and our attorneys and recommended for.
Thank you. Need a motion for this item, please. Eric, thank you. And a second. Scott, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor? 6, none opposed. Motion passes 6-0. Action item number 5, approval of policies. Second read 7420, sports and the athletic program. First read 3600, monitoring of Brewster Central School District social media accounts.
Yes, we submit these 2 policies which have been approved and recommended by our policy committee. First is the easy one, I should say, is the second read 7420, which is just a title change. However, the board will note that policy 3600, which is up for a first read, was the policy that was sent to us from you asking for some feedback. So just briefly, January 12th, we discussed this in depth. The committee has several proposed revisions. First has to do with the title itself. The initial title was monitoring of Brewster Central School District sponsored accounts. The committee is recommending that we change that to Brewster Central School District social media accounts to be more specific as to what the policy itself is referring to. We also mentioned in the second paragraph some additional applications. We thought it was important to draw the community's attention to what specific accounts we would be, this policy would pertain to, even though we included the language, including but not limited to. And finally, we just recommended some additional concise language.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion for this item, please. Francine, thank you. And a second. Daisy, thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
I know we had talked about this in length. Is there a way to put any more teeth into it? In our discussions, we're trying to give fair access, but limit the off the cuff stuff. If the conversation evolves on our social media pages, which has nothing to do with the topic, which is two people, whether they're respectful or not, going back and forth, is there a way to just say this is not relevant to the discussion and just get rid of it? Something like that.
So I believe, I think I passed on, there was some language that the attorneys did provide that in that scenario where it's off topic, not related to the content, that there would be a kind of standard language that we could use to remind people of, you know, they're getting off topic, to kind of please respect the rules that are, you know, will be kind of posted with the main page of the social sites or whatever. So I know that, I'm not sure if it happened yet, I know there's gonna be some training with two different people to kind of tackle exactly what you're talking about so that we can manage that. Or that it can be managed.
Yeah, that was what I was going to mention, that we would be trained with our tech department, who did an excellent job, and also Jen Harry, who monitors our social media accounts, to make sure that they knew exactly what to do.
I had a question, I lost it. Oh, just, I think I appreciate, you know, social media accounts, because I think people will understand what we're talking about, like you said, Dr. Gosh. I think it was the attorneys that said like sponsored, district sponsored accounts was when we were talking about it. But and then you say that we were more specific. So I think it'll help people really understand what we're talking about. If it comes up in the future, there's other accounts, we'll just have to update the policy. And I just also want to add in terms of policies in general, our policies tend to be, this might have been a question, but tend to be kind of directives from the state also. You know, policies that need to get updated or looked at depending on the changes in the law and different things that come up. So I think sometimes there's concern about policies and why they originated, where they come from. And a lot of it is, if not all, I'm not sure, but I think there's guidance we have to kind of follow. I'm trying to speak to that so people understand it's not just, you know, a policy committee that we have in place getting together to create things.
Yes, you're exactly right. I believe 4 or 5 years ago, we did a complete overhaul of the policy manual. You're on the board then, you remember the torture that was. But now we're in the phase where we're maintaining those policies. So we subscribe to a service through Erie One BOCES, which has a legal department as well, and they send out policy updates quarterly to say, here are some changes in the law you might want to think about. You know, your own policies. Here are some sample policies. We then consult with our own attorneys and bring forward sort of the context as well as proposed language to the committee. The committee works off of that, and then we work it through the process. There are some times when events come up and we say, oh, our practice is ahead of our policy, or vice versa. So we make adjustments in that case, but for the most part, these are mandated by law or regulation as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything? No? Okay, we can go to the vote. All those in favor? 6, none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Okay, action item number 6, approval of resolution for tenure appointment.
Yes, thank you. So good evening. We have the privilege this evening of recommending Ms. Olga Rodriguez-Benhi for tenure. As you know, it's the most important decisions that administrators and in turn boards of education will make in terms of the investment in someone over the long term and the impact that they have in the lives of children. So we've asked Ms. Andriello to please speak on behalf of Ms. Rodriguez-Benhi this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. Ms. Rodriguez is a dedicated and caring TESOL teacher who is committed to her students' success. Ms. Rodriguez collaborates with her fellow colleagues and is always eager to welcome visitors into her room and share her knowledge of her students and their learning. A fun fact about Ms. Rodriguez is that she loves to do hands-on activities with her students and has been known to bring her crock pot into class from time to time for lots of yummy activities. One of the best things about Ms. Rodriguez is that she builds great relationships with students, which extend far beyond their time at CV Star. In fact, Ms. Rodriguez's name can be frequently heard being called in the hallways by middle school students who happen to spot her and want to say hi. She is also an advocate for her students and their families, often helping them to access information and services both within the district and beyond. Outside of school, Ms. Rodriguez loves spending time with her family, her husband, Mark, their children, Gabby and Daniel, and their new puppy, Willow. In closing, Ms. Rodriguez is a respected professional by both students and faculty, and it is a pleasure to have her be a part of the CV Star family. Congratulations, Olga.
Thank you very much. If I may take a minute, I would like to thank Dr. Banlow, Dr. Gash, Mrs. Andriello, and the board for giving me the opportunity to teach in Brewster. I have the privilege to work with wonderful and caring teachers and administrators. We work together as a team, creating a supportive and an enriching learning experience for all Brewster students. I look forward to teaching many years in Brewster. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I need a motion for this item. Carrie, thank you. In a second. Eric, questions or comments? Okay, we can just go right to the vote. Keep wanting to call people's names out. All those in favor? 6, with none opposed, the motion passes 6-0. And I'd like to say congratulations. And thank you for sharing all those kind words. And Dr. Van, if you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I just want to say congratulations, Mrs. Rodriguez. Job well done. We are so thrilled to have you in the district. And it was an honor to observe you this year as well. So thank you for having me visit the classroom. And we just want to say big congratulations to you and your family.
Thank you.
I miss everyone being back in person together. We're doing our best. Okay, we move on now to action number 7. A stipulation of settlement for employee number 3742.
Yes, this action item reflects an approval for stipulation of settlement for employee number 3742.
Thank you. I need a motion for this item, please. Eric, thank you. Second. Scott, thank you. Questions or comments on this item? Seeing none. All those in favor? 6, with none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Okay, action number 8, approval of stipulation of settlement for employee number 1944.
Again, this is an action item subject to your approval for stipulation of settlement for employee 1944.
Okay, I need a motion for this item, please. Francine, thank you. And a second, Daisy. Questions or comments from the board? Great, seeing none. All those in favor? 6, none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 9, approval of elimination of computer aid classified position 0.5 FTE.
Yes, the district has made a concerted effort to increasingly streamline our classified positions, and we've moved increasingly towards computer operations aides. So through attrition, this reflects the elimination of 1.5 computer aid in the district, subject to your approval.
Okay, thank you. Need a motion for this item, please. Daisy, thank you. In a second. Carrie, thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Oh, it's that microphone again. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Where are we at? Questions, comments? Okay. We go right to the vote. All those in favor? 6, none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Action item number 10, approval of resolution to approve high-risk sports fall season 2 and spring season.
Okay, I'll take that. And
We did 9. We just did 9. We're on 10. Right? Yeah. Okay.
so I'll read the resolution. Whereas New York State's reopening guidance for sports and recreation activities categorizes sports activities as lower risk, moderate risk, and higher risk. And whereas on January 22nd, 2021, Governor Cuomo announced that the sports categorized as high risk, including wrestling, basketball, ice hockey, competitive cheerleading, contact lacrosse, football, volleyball, etc., will be permitted as of February 1st, 2021, as permitted by the local health department and during the New York State Public High School Athletic Association modified sports seasons of winter, fall 2, and spring for the 2020-2021 school year. Whereas on February 2nd, 2021, the Putnam County Department of Health issued its guidance on higher risk sports in Putnam County. And whereas effective February 2nd, 2021, and until otherwise indicated, student athletes are permitted to participate in K-12 sponsored sports categorized as higher risk in Putnam County, provided the specific requirements of the February 2nd, 2021 Putnam County Department of Health guidance are met. And whereas Putnam County Department of Health requires each Board of Education or the superintendent to approve or certify the school district's participation in each higher risk sport and the grades of sports of students permitted to participate. The Putnam County Department of Health does not require approval for lower and moderate risk sports, girls lacrosse, track and field, swimming and dive, baseball, softball, etc. And whereas the Brewster Central School District Board of Education approved higher risk sports for the 2020-21 winter sports season on February 8th, 2021, now therefore the Brewster Central School District Board of Education hereby approves the participation in the following high-risk sports for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year. Fall 2 season, football varsity, grades 9, 10, 11, 12. Fall 2 season, football JV, 9, 10, 11, 12. Fall season 2 volleyball, varsity, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Fall season 2 volleyball JV, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Volleyball modified, grades 7 and 8. Competitive cheerleading, varsity, grades 9, 10, 11, 12. Spring season, boys lacrosse, varsity, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Boys lacrosse JV, grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Boys lacrosse modified, grades 7 and 8. Subject to compliance with the Putnam County Department of Health requirements and New York State and the New York State Public High School Sports Athletic Association guidance pertaining to COVID-19. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education approves the use of the Putnam County Code of Conduct as modified and acknowledgement and assumption of risk form for higher risk sports.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion for this item, please. Eric, thank you. And a second. Scott, thank you. Okay, questions or comments on this item?
So, are there modified sports at this point that have not been, that we have not had the need and opportunity to approve or discuss?
Mr. Berardo, you want to answer that, please?
Well, first of all, the section really hasn't sponsored any modified sports at this time. The only sports that they have sponsored have been swimming, which we do not have, and modified track and field, which we do not have. So we're hoping that modified volleyball is approved by the Section 1 Executive Committee. I think they're meeting next week, and we're hoping that in turn that the spring modified sports seasons are approved so we can participate, all on that progressive scale which I was talking about previously. Excuse me.
Okay.
I didn't know what the status of that.
Status of basketball? Basketball, Coach Berardo?
Basketball, the Section 1 Executive Committee canceled the high-risk modified sports season. So we did not have an opportunity to participate in that.
wanted to just follow up on the conversation we had last time on sports. Did we ever get updates on whether we need physicals or anything on the cardiac exams? I know they mentioned it, but we didn't have it last time.
Okay, Mr. Gerardo was on cardiac exams and updated sports physicals. Did we ever get any updates on that?
We are working, I'm actively working on the cardiac clearance policy, which I will hopefully, I have been working back and forth with our school district attorney. We've had 3 revisions to it. So hopefully I can get that to the policy committee as soon as possible. Presently, anyone who's had a COVID-19 diagnosis within the past 30 days gets a phone call from myself or the nurses. We explain to the parents the need for a cardiac clearance and the various stages that our school physician, Dr. Luis Casaro, recommends. So the parents have been very appreciative of that. They understand that. They also want what we want for their athletes. So that's going pretty good so far, knock on wood. And the physical piece, we're maintaining the New York State guidance on that, Mr. Seaman. So that is, a physical is good for, 1 full year with an updated athletic health history. And if there is an issue with something like the cardiac clearance, the school physician would approve the cardiac clearance and then in turn approve the physical.
Not for Coach Gerardo, but did we ever get an MOA from the bargaining units in regards to payments for the coach schedules? I know we talked about it, but I don't know if we ever got an update.
We're going to give you an update in the Friday update to the board on that. And we did, so we're going to give you guys that update this Friday, and we'll bring it to the board at the next board meeting.
Anyone else have anything? Perfect, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor? That's 5 opposed, 1, motion passes 5 with 1 opposed. Thank you. Action item number 11, approval of Westchester Cunningham School Boards Association resolution on New York State funding of public education.
Mr. Colson?
So there's a lot to unpackage here. So contained within this resolution, it really analyzes the governor's budget proposal, which is over the past several years is becoming increasingly complex. So really just to summarize, if you look at the therefore be it resolved section, the first therefore be it resolved suggests that the district call on state legislators, of course, to ensure public schools receive short-term and long-term funding to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. The next paragraph or sentence calls on the legislators to reject the executive budget proposal to fully supplant state aid with coronavirus supplemental funds. Again, that $100 billion that was just passed this past December. In typical state fashion, they've taken state aid out of our left pocket, replaced it with federal funds in our right pocket. We're ultimately held harmless in the exchange, thank God. But this is calling for the school districts to receive that full amount of federal aid in addition to the state aid that's been withdrawn by the governor in his proposal. Next paragraph calls for the removal of the governor's STAR proposal. So this was not discussed in our state budget, our state aid presentation, but included in the governor's proposal this year is a reduction in the STAR reimbursement. So typically the relationship between the STAR reimbursement has been between the school district and the New York State government. The taxpayer's bill is net of that reduction. The taxpayer is not held harmless in the exchange, and the state government then reimburses the school districts. Included in the governor's proposal this year is a reduction in that STAR amount. So again, the homeowners are held harmless. However, the school district would not receive the full STAR reimbursement from the state as it had traditionally in the past. The next paragraph has to deal with the restoration of foundation aid and funding foundation aid as it was intended. So we did talk about this during our state aid presentation. And if you recall, each year the Brewster Central School District received about $4.4 million less than it would had the state actually implemented its foundation aid formula. The next paragraph recommends the rejection of the consolidation of 11 expense-based aids into services aid. So as you recall from our presentation, that would severely reduce the district's incentive to participate in things like BOCES services. It would also reduce reimbursements for transportation services. And as Mr. Gressner pointed out during our state aid presentation, even our bus purchases would be impacted by it. Next paragraph recommends that the state actually deliver the transportation aid for the time during the school closure of March to June of 2020. So as you recall, our transportation aid is at risk, which is roughly a third of the school year. It's a significant amount of money for the Brewster Central School District, as is for all school districts throughout the state. And currently, based on current education law, the Brewster Central School District will not receive transportation aid on days in which transportation was not provided, in spite of the fact that one of the governor's executive orders was that school districts maintain all members on payroll during that time, which of course we did. Next has to do with rejection of a proposal for the state to continue to fund its reimbursement on residential costs for our special needs students. And of course, again, included in the governor's proposal is the elimination of the state's obligation to fund reimbursement for residential placed students. Next item has to do with prior year adjustments. So an example of this would be a school district that failed to submit timely state aid forms for building aid. You may recall a couple of years ago, Manpack schools failed to submit timely building aid forms and was at risk of losing several $1 million over the course of 10, 15 years. And the governor's proposal again is proposing to eliminate prior year adjustments. Finally, the last proposal here is to set the allowable growth factor in the tax cap calculation at a flat 2%. So if you recall, on average over the past 10 years, the allowable growth factor has been on average 1.55%. This proposal is suggesting that 2% be the number each year, which would really help the school district in long range planning. With the CPI being as volatile as it's been, it's very difficult for a school district to maintain operations in the future without knowing what the tax cap will be in the tax base growth. So that was a lot to unpackage.
Thank you so much for that. I need a motion, please. Francine, thank you. In a second. Daisy, questions or comments from the board?
Just one quick item, because when we prepared it, the commissioner, Debbie Rosa, was listed as interim. I believe she's now been made official. So if we could just correct her title. And I suggest that once we push this out, our families and everybody, continue to push. The more people make noise, the more they respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, ready to go? All those in favor? 6, none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Okay, action item number 12, calendar adjustment. March K-5 parent-teacher conferences from March 11th and 18th to a date to be determined.
Yes, thank you. Since these two half days were approved at last March's calendar approval, we would ask for your approval in order to switch those dates to a date to be determined. So we would have full instructional days on March 11th and March 18th in grades K through 12.
Thank you. Need a motion for this item, please? Carrie, thank you. And a second. Eric, thank you. Questions or comments on this item?
Do we have a time frame when we might expect to be scheduled?
Mrs. Real and I, the president of the BTA, have been in discussions with that. We would like to see how the next month progresses, to see how often we're able to keep schools open. Hopefully we won't have to do more quarantining and staff, but we would like to revisit that with the board in later March or early April.
Anyone else? All right. Go to the vote. All those in favor? 6, with none opposed, motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick note, the board public will note the retirement of Ms. Carolyn Adams. We certainly wish her much success and health in retirement. She has served the district for 15 years, beginning as a library aide and serving as the administrative assistant in People Personnel Services under Dr. Cunningham. And we certainly look forward to celebrating her fine career in the coming months.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for this item, please? Sherry, thank you. In a second. Daisy, thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? 6. None opposed. Motion passes 6-0. I was taking a note, sorry. We now can move on to remarks. So here is where we do public remarks. So now we can address any final email communications that came in that were general announcement.
Okay. Yeah, there were just 2. The first relates to snow days. After we use 5 snow days, will students have remote instructions on snow days thereafter, or will the days be taken away from spring break?
Okay, I'll let, thank you, Mrs. Cunningham, I'll answer that. So as of today, at this moment, we have 1 more traditional snow day left. Apparently, but it's not been put out in writing. There were 2 days that we had that real big storm that were state of emergency that may not be counted against us, but we haven't heard that yet. But any other days that come up past the one that we have left as of now would be remote days. So we really want to do that.
And then one other question we received related to policy 6175, which was on for a first read at our last meeting. And the questions posed in the email relate to the meaning of cultural competency in that policy. And as I said, that was on a first read at the last meeting, so that was sent back to the policy committee for review and further review by legal, and it will be brought back to the board for a second review. But maybe there's something that can be added to respond to that.
Sure, thanks, Ms. Cunningham. As Ms. Masika astutely pointed out earlier, board policies are often directed by SED, and certainly the state of New York has made a concerted effort to ensure that districts are becoming more culturally responsive in their practices. We're certainly aware of the good work that we're doing with NYU, and mindful that New York State's student demographic has shifted and changed. And with that comes a greater understanding of what it means to be educating students who may come from very different backgrounds, particularly cultural backgrounds. So the policy as it's written certainly reflects, is aspirational in nature. It is in part reflective of the communication and the work that SED is encouraging districts to do. And it's a reflection of our values, that we're very much committed to candidates that recognize that this is a diverse school district and that they have students that come from different cultural backgrounds, and that they need to be mindful of inclusion and equity in their practice. And as we continue to field those questions, I might just also add that I think we need to be mindful of how we're continuing to educate our community, and to what extent even there may be coded language in some of those questions that are potentially raised, because we have a commitment to ensuring that we're hiring the best candidates possible, not at the expense of other criteria and qualifications. So it's always about pedagogy, best instructional practices. It's always about sound expertise in their content area. And it's a reflection of a teacher's emotional intelligence, which includes their cultural competence. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thanks.
Okay, and so just to comment to the community that's still with us, you're always welcome to email the board, and the superintendent also receives the email on that to boe@boosterschools.org. You know, if they relate specifically to our agendas as they come up, we will address them during the meeting. And any email that comes to us before the start of the meeting, obviously when we're doing the meeting, we're not checking emails. So anything prior to that, we will address. And just to, I probably should have said this earlier, but we do get a lot of emails. Dr. Brownlow gets a lot of emails, or administrators. I mean, everyone gets emails, teachers. But generally, we'll do our best to respond, you know, during the week, during business hours. They come in throughout the entire weekend, and weekends are, you know, busy. Everyone's doing different things, so we do try to get back to them as soon as we can. But generally, we try to get back to them within, you know, working business hours during the week. So just always know that we will get a reply, a response, and we will acknowledge them during the board meeting. And sometimes there's emails that we will get a more immediate response in the email, or someone from the district will reach out to you directly.
And if I may add, also, we've had a couple situations where some families are having real difficulties. So do not hesitate to reach out to the building principal, vice principal, so we can help right away. We've got, you know, unfortunately, a lot of counselors in the district, or pathologists, so please make sure that you reach out for help. We're here.
We can now move on to board remarks. Any committee updates? Sure.
Yeah, the NISBA, Washington School Board, as Dr. Van mentioned, is pressing our assembly senators, they're pushing them on budget, governor's interpretation of things, and they're just we all keep up the work on that. Down in the village of Easter last week, they were going over the legislation plan. They were showing images of the proposal for the evaluation of downtown Booster. It's on the website. There's a lot of information out there. Town of Southeast, mentioning once again, a lot of our kids had known about Castle Park, which is now gone, but they're in the process of having it rebuilt and hoping to roll it out come springtime. I guess there is the Arts Coalition, which is located downtown Booster. A lot of our theater groups and other people interact with them. And they made a really nice presentation to the board to get the word out on it, explain what's going on. And if appropriate, at a time that fits our schedule, if I could suggest, we maybe reach out to them and see if they could give a watered down version of the presentation. As theater people are, and for enough people that talk a lot, so we can read it down, but there's a lot of information out there, which is tied to a lot of our students here, especially now that while sports are open, the performing arts aren't as much. So there's other outlets for it. I think that put them in a concept.
We will absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Just another reminder about the Challenge Match program that the Brewster Education Foundation is a part of until March 31st. We're able to double all the donations that come in, $5,000. So please, if you have the opportunity, all that money goes towards the technology and putting new technology in the hands of our students here in Brewster. So, you know, the double the matching grant challenge. So just encourage everybody to have the opportunity and the ability to donate at DEF.org.
Okay. Our next meeting is March 9th. I believe, yes, March 9th.
Yeah. Yeah, we have March 2nd, we have the retreat.
We have a retreat on March 2nd.
6:30, and March 9th, yeah.
And then March 9th next board. Okay. As always, you can email the board, boe@boosterschools.org, and we do not have executive session. So we just, I just need a motion to close the meeting. Kenzie, thank you. And a second. Scott, thank you. All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. We are all set. Thank you, everyone. Good night.